Okay, good morning, everybody. It is the time is 10 o'clock. I call the July 27th, 2023 Planning Board meeting to order. We are joined by Commissioner Giraldo.
Good morning.
Commissioner Washington.
Good morning.
Commissioner Dorner.
Good morning.
And I am Chair Shapiro. Moving forward to the business at hand, please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with a link provided in the email provided by the planning board office or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. Of course, anyone may tune in to watch our proceedings via live stream, and if you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use the online web form, which you'll see referenced on the screen before you. In addition to the commissioners, we are joined by our principal counsel, David Warner. We have Jessica Jones, our planning board administrator. We have Joe Parsons and Rhonda Ford, our technical hearing writers, and James Hunt, the division chief for the development review division. We are also joined by, supported by Kent Flanagan and Ryan Croner, helping us with technology behind the scenes. So on to the business at hand. We'll take the order of cases in the order that they're listed on the agenda. We'll begin with item 2. I would look for a motion to approve the draft minutes of July 13th, 2023.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it. 4-0. Next item is our consent agenda. Please note that item 4D was removed from the planning board agenda. Is there anyone here who wishes to oppose the staff's recommendations, or any board members who wish to discuss any of these items? This is for A, B, C, E, F, G, and H. If there's none, then I would look for a motion.
After consideration of the record for item numbers 4A, B, C, E, F, and H, I move adoption of staff's finding and approval of the items on the consent agenda in accordance with the recommendation of staff.
Second.
We got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Did you neglect to say item 4G, or am I missing it?
I'm sorry, A, B, G, E, F, and H. Did I get that right?
I think it's A, B, C, E, F, G, H, I think.
Or note H, actually. A, B, E, F, and G. I think I said H because I thought I heard you say H, but I don't see it on the agenda.
Yeah, I don't see H on the agenda either. James?
No, the 4A to 4G, according to the consent agenda.
Okay, yeah, there is an, I'm sorry, Chair, there is an item H. It's a park and recreation item. It's a draft resolution for the Black Branch Stream Valley.
Okay, so there is an item H. What I have is, and that was Joe Parsons, I believe, right, Joe?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what I have is items, and correct me, Joe or James, correct me if I'm wrong. I have items 4A, B, C, E, F, G, and H.
That is correct.
Well, no C, because there is no C.
I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It is A, 4A, 4B, 4E, 4F, 4G, and 4H.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Sorry about that.
And I'm going to say, Commissioner Washington, that is your motion, correct? And
Indeed it is, Mr. Chairman.
so now we have a motion and a second. Motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you. We'll now move on to our regular agenda items. We'll begin with item 5, which is DSP 95029-01 Reza Alabani. Do this. I want to turn to Mr. Hunt. I think he's an introduction for it. Mr. Hunt, we can't hear you. Also, there's other folks who need to mute on the background, staff, individuals, but also staff, if you could help with this.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Chair?
I can hear you, and I still hear the background. Buddy.
There we go.
Here we go.
All right.
Take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board. For the record, I'm James Hunt with the Development Review Division. Just real quick, I wanted to take an opportunity to introduce to the Planning Board and to the public, Ms. Andrea Dorlester. She's our new Planning Supervisor for Urban Design. We are so excited that she has decided to join us here with the Planning Department. She comes to us from Fairfax County, Virginia, where she has over 20 years of experience, not only within development review and urban design and subdivision as well as zoning, she's also worked with their parks departments over there. So we're really excited to have her on board. Just wanted to take a quick moment to introduce you all to Andrea Dorlester here. She's really going, like I said, going to be taking over urban design. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Ms. Dorlester, very nice to meet you and welcome aboard. You have clearly made Mr. Hunt and others quite happy already. So looking forward to working with you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So back to item 5 on the agenda, DSP 95029-01, Reza Auto Body. We have Mr. Rivera, who represents the applicant. We have Mr. Wong, who's going to be giving the staff presentation. This is going to be a request for a continuance. This is an evidentiary hearing, so if we are looking for testimony, I will ask people to take an oath. I don't think that's going to be happening since this is a request for a continuance. Let me start with a brief staff presentation. Mr. Wong, take it away.
Mr. Chair, can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can. Thanks for checking.
Okay. Good morning again, Mr. Chair and members of Planning Board. For the record, I'm Emery Huang with the Urban Design Sections. Item 5 in front of you is a detailed site plan DSP-95029-01 Reza Auto Body, which is seeking to add the entire land area parcel A to the site plan, permit additional use of vehicle storage yard, and delete condition 1A and C and 6 of the detailed site plan DSP-95029. The applicant has requested a continuous to the September 7th Planning Board hearing to work with staff on reviewing the prior detailed site plan condition approval. The applicant has previously approved a 70 days extension to the Planning Board action limit, which now expires on October 3rd, 2023. Staff recommended that Planning Board approve the request of continuous to September 7th, 2023. This will conclude staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Commissioners, any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant on the request for continuance? No questions. Mr. Rivera, floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Norman Rivera, and we concur with the staff's recommendations so we can work with your staff for September 7th hearing. Thank you very much and have a great August.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rivera. You as well. Commissioners, you have heard the request for continuance. Unless there's any questions, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the recommendation of staff and approve the continuance for DSP-95029-01 to September 7th, 2023.
Got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, I'm sorry.
I've got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Dorner. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Good night.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Thank you, Mr. Wong. Next item on agenda, item 6, preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22065 Cabot Branch Industrial Parcel 1. We have Mr. Haller, who will be representing the applicant. We have Ms. Gupta, who will be giving a staff presentation. We do have folks signed up to speak, and I'll remind folks that This is an evidentiary hearing as well. So in this case, we're requiring those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. So at this time, I'm going to ask all persons who are intending to provide testimony to come online and to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I'll consider yourself sworn in. I will now turn to Ms. Gupta for the staff presentation. Then we'll hear from Mr. Haller. And we'll hear from folks in the community who want to speak as well.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Just doing a sound check.
We can hear you
Can you
fine.
hear me?
Yep.
Great,
all good.
thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. For the record, I'm Ridula Gupta with the subdivision section. Item number 6 on the agenda is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22065 titled Cabin Branch Industrial Parcel 1, which proposes one parcel for development of 80,000 square feet of industrial development. This application is supported by and subject to Certificate of Adequacy ADQ-2022-082, which ensures adequate public facilities to support the proposed land use. The Certificate of Adequacy was approved with conditions on July 14th, 2023, in accordance with Section 24-1904C of the subdivision regulations. This Certificate of Adequacy is included in your backup. As a matter of housekeeping, the additional backup includes one exhibit received from the applicant prior to the July 25th noon deadline. Staff also received a referral from the town of Cheverly on July 24th, which is included in the additional backup. Next slide, please. The site is located in the central area of Prince George's County within Planning Area 72 and Council District 5. Next slide, please. More specifically, the site is located on the west side of Cabin Branch Drive, approximately 500 feet north of its intersection with Sheriff Road. Next slide, please. The image to the left shows that the subject site, outlined in red, is located in the industrial heavy or IH zone as highlighted in gray color. The surrounding properties are located in the IH and the industrial employment zones. The property zoning notwithstanding, this preliminary plan of subdivision is reviewed in accordance with the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations pursuant to Section 24-1900 of the subdivision regulations. Under the prior zoning ordinance, this site is within the heavy industrial or I2 zone as shown in the image to the right in gray color. This preliminary plan of subdivision was evaluated according to the standards of that zone. Next slide, please. The aerial photograph shows that the site, which is outlined in red, is currently improved with asphalt paving and is used as a storage yard. Next slide, please. The site map shows that the site, which is delineated on this slide in pink, is generally flat, except for the area to the east, which is traversed by the stream valley of Cabin Branch. Next slide. This slide shows the master plan rights-of-way located in the vicinity of the site. Next slide. This is the bird's eye view of the property, which is outlined in light blue, looking northwards. Cabin Branch Drive is located along the east side of the property with warehouses beyond. The land to the north of the property is vacant as seen at the top of the slide. A private right-of-way which connects to Sheriff Road is located west of the property. Industrial uses are located to the west and to the south. Next slide. This slide shows the outline of the new parcel in red and the public and private rights-of-way shaded in purple. The primary management area, or PMA, is highlighted in pink. No additional dedication of public right-of-way or creation of private streets is required for the proposed development. Primary vehicular access from the site to a public street, as required by the prior zoning ordinance, is proposed at one point along the property's frontage to Cabin Branch Drive, shown with arrows on the slide. The applicant proposes to align this access point with the entrance to the Whole Foods Distribution Center, located along the east side of Cabin Branch Drive, which is to the top of the slide here. An additional point of access is proposed along the site's frontage on a private right-of-way, which is located along the western bounds of the subject site, and that's to the on the lower side of the slide here. This access is proposed to be used for emergencies only, since the prior subdivision regulations do not permit a private road, a private right-of-way, or an easement as means of vehicular access to a lot in an industrial zone. The 2009 approved countywide Master Plan of Transportation, or MPOT, recommends a hard surface trail within the stream valley of the Cabin Branch. However, in prior development approvals of properties in the immediate vicinity of the subject site, the stream valley was determined to not be a practical or desirable location for a trail. Prior approvals have included recommendations to realign the master plan trail along Cabin Branch Drive. As such, this preliminary plan of subdivision includes an 8-foot wide site path along the site's frontage of Cabin Branch Drive. This facility will maintain a consistent bicycle and pedestrian network and minimize impacts to the environmental features. MPOT also recommends a bicycle lane along the site's frontage of Cabin Branch Drive. Given the heavy industrial uses existing along Cabin Branch Drive and those proposed for the subject site, an in-road bicycle lane is not recommended. Further, the proposed 8-foot wide site path does allow for both bicyclists and pedestrians to utilize the facility safely and separated from vehicular traffic. Next slide, please. This slide shows the outline of the new parcel in red and the public and private rights-of-way shaded in purple. The primary management area, comprised of 100-year floodplain and stream buffers, is highlighted in pink. This application proposes 2 temporary and 2 permanent impacts to the PMA, totaling 0.79 acres. The permanent impacts are highlighted here in deep yellow and reflect existing pavement encroachments into the PMA and impacts proposed for the installation of a site entrance driveway. The temporary impacts are highlighted on this slide in light yellow and include installation of utilities and removal of an existing bridge. Staff support these impacts, and staff analysis of the PMA impacts and its finding are provided on pages 16 and 17 of the staff report. The woodland conservation requirement is proposed to be satisfied with 0.53 acre of on-site woodland conservation, highlighted on the slide in green, and 1 acre within an off-site woodland conservation mitigation bank. As mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, the additional backup includes 1 applicant's exhibit which proposes revisions to recommended conditions 3 and 7 related to the timing for submittal of the stormwater management concept plan and the type 2 tree conservation plan. Staff has reviewed the proposed revisions and is in agreement with them. Applicant's exhibit also includes supplemental materials regarding the stormwater management plan, the Maryland Department of Environment, or MDE, permits for the proposed development within the waters of the United States, sections of the state land use code and county subdivision regulations, and proposed striping plan for the Cabin Branch Drive. Staff understands that the applicant will use these exhibits for their presentation. Staff also received a letter dated July 18, 2023 from the town of Cheverly, containing their comments on this preliminary plan of subdivision and their recommendations. Subject property is located within 1 mile of the limits of town of Cheverly. And this preliminary plan of subdivision was referred to the town on June 8th, 2023. Staff has had written and telephonic correspondence with the township regarding this project. Ms. Sheila Salo from the town of Cheverly's Green Infrastructure Committee contacted staff prior to the publishing of the technical staff report regarding the proposed bridging of the Cabin Branch to provide direct access to the property from Cabin Branch Drive and the proposed PMA impacts. Ms. Salo wanted to know why this access was being recommended for approval when the site could be accessed from a private right-of-way located to the west. Staff in their response explained that while the site has an existing vehicular access via a private right-of-way from Sheriff Road, in accordance with Section 27-466.01 of the prior zoning ordinance, all lots in an industrial zone are required to have frontage on and direct vehicular access to a public street. Furthermore, prior subdivision regulations do not permit a private road, a private right-of-way, or an easement as means of vehicular access to a lot in an industrial zone. Regarding the proposed impacts to the vehicular bridge on the PMA, staff responded that these impacts were reviewed and were found to have been minimized to the fullest extent possible. The bridge has been located at the point of least impact to the PMA. The design of the bridge itself avoids placement of riprap at the stream floor and does not alter the stream bed. These responses are contained within finding 12, that's pages 18 and 19 of the technical staff report. Regarding the July 18, 2023 letter from the town of Cheverly, several of the recommendations are either already addressed in the technical staff report or are not germane to the review and consideration of a preliminary plan of subdivision application. I will now list each of the recommendations and present a point-by-point response. And this letter is in your backup, and I'll be referring to each point as a paragraph because it's not itemized in the letter. So paragraph 3 will be literally paragraph 3 in the letter, if that helps in following my presentation. Thanks.
It does, thank you.
Thank you. So paragraph 3 in the letter, the town of Cheverly requests that the planning board require that the bridge crossing the Cabin Branch stream to be built to the highest environmental standards with minimal impact to the environment. Staff, in their environmental review of the project, evaluated the location of the bridge and its impact on the PMA. Staff's review and recommendations are provided in finding 10 on pages 9 through 18 of the staff report. As previously stated, the bridge has been located at the point of least impact to the PMA. The bridge design avoids any impacts to the floodplain or stream hydrology. Utilities within the PMA are proposed to be installed by jack and bore method instead of open cut trenching. Runoff from existing paved surfaces will be captured for water quality treatment before discharge into the stream. Thus, the project will reduce the impact to the environment compared to the existing conditions at the site. In paragraph 4, the town expects that the developer work with the town regarding annexation and that the developer will participate in local business associations. The requests stated in this paragraph are not germane to the review of this application. Paragraph 5 includes town's request that the developer widen sidewalks and include a protected bike lane. In paragraph 6, includes town's comment that the traffic study provided by the applicant does not reflect real-world impact on surrounding residents and requests that an updated traffic study be submitted. Staff's response is that the pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular transportation for this project was reviewed for conformance with the master plan, the countywide master plan of transportation, and the prior subdivision regulations to provide the appropriate transportation recommendations. Staff's review and recommendations are provided in finding 6 on pages 6 and 7 of the staff report. As previously stated in the presentation, the proposed 8-foot wide side path along the property's frontage on Cabin Branch Drive will provide for both bicyclists and pedestrians separate from vehicular traffic. The vehicular traffic impacts were reviewed in accordance with the applicable level of service standards and found to be adequate as approved with the certificate of adequacy associated with the site. In paragraph 7, the town requests that the developer work with the town's Green Infrastructure Committee and Friends of Lower Beaver Dam Creek on issues regarding landscaping, invasive species, and mitigation for lost or damaged trees. Landscaping, including removal of invasive species for the proposed development, will be reviewed at the time of permitting. In paragraph 8, the town requests that the developer ensure that the property is set up to support the highest and latest environmental best practices and encourage all tenants to abide by these practices, including the use of rooftop solar panels. In paragraph 9, the town requests that all on-site lighting be consistent with dark sky standards and that bathroom facilities with bottle refill stations be provided for truck drivers. Compliance with environmental requirements are outlined in the technical staff report, and solar panels, lighting, and building amenities are included with site and building design, which are not reviewed with a preliminary plan of subdivision. These issues can be addressed by the applicant at the time of permitting. Paragraph 10 of the letter requests that the applicant participate in University of Maryland's hyperlocal air quality monitoring network project and agree to install an air quality monitor on the property. Staff understands that this is a voluntary data collection program. The applicant has the option to participate in this program. Mr. Haller can talk more about this request in his presentation. In paragraph 11, the town requests that the developer participate in scheduled cleanup events of the Cabin Branch stream. Participation by the developer in these events is not germane to the review of this application. In paragraph 12, the town requests that the developer use permeable pavers in parking areas. These permeable pavers are a stormwater management practice which enables infiltration of stormwater into the ground. Review and permitting of stormwater management is under the purview of the Department of Permitting, Enforcement, and Inspections, or DPI. However, staff notes that the existing on-site soils, which include Marlboro clays, are not conducive to the effective performance of the stormwater management practice. That's the last of the town's request in their letter. Could we go to the last slide? So in conclusion, staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve the preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22065 and type 1 tree conservation plan TCP 1-010-2023, subject to the conditions found on pages 19 through 21 of the staff report, as revised by applicant's Exhibit 1. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. Thank you for that very, very thorough point-by-point to the town's communications with us. It's very helpful. It's just great that you all are being so attentive to the questions from the town. Not all of them are relevant to this point in the process, but the thoroughness is noted and helpful. So thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Gupta or other staff?
Yeah, I have kind of a general question, Ms. Gupta, about one of the suggestions from the town on rooftop solar. What I'm interested in finding out, and this doesn't have to be something we you answer immediately if you don't know offhand. But I'd like to know from like staff, particularly the environmental section, what's our stance on rooftop solar versus like painting rooftops white? From like an environmental standpoint, there's trade-offs obviously for energy usage and encouraging that with rooftop solar. It tends to be more of like reducing ongoing monthly costs on like a residential level. But if we have commercial buildings, if they were to put in some rooftop solar, but then be looking at potentially offsetting that by having a white rooftop to kind of reduce heat, how would we kind of weigh that, and what would we prefer on those kinds of recommendations? And then particularly to give that kind of feedback to cities when their planning boards or departments are making those kinds of recommendations.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Commissioner. And that's a very good point. It's unfortunately at this stage, we do not review, we do not have any indication of what the building is proposed, what use is proposed. It's probably at the time of permitting that question could be looked at. But I myself don't have an answer to your question.
Okay, can you then work, and maybe this is for Mr. Hunt, to kind of like, I realize for this particular case, like we're not going to deal with it, like it's premature at the preliminary stage, but I would just like to know in general, like, when we're dealing with cities and providing kind of feedback, because I think even if it's outside our purview from a permitting perspective, we're the experts, or not me, but you all are the experts on these kinds of issues, and it would be helpful for you to be able to make suggestions from like a professional subject matter expertise kind of standpoint to applicants, to cities and stuff when there might be trade-offs involved, whether it be cost or whether it just be like property use types that we might want to recommend to improve environmental aspects of the county, but also think about what we would prefer in certain kinds of land uses.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioner Joyner. Just to your point, I think, again, this is probably an urban design issue. And so we really have not addressed that in the past. And I'm glad you brought that up. This is another area that we definitely can start looking into and making suggestions to applicants moving forward. Not just saying that they can provide, like you said, the solar panels. There are other methods that are out there to help reduce heat within the buildings themselves and also to encourage more environmentally safe types of design when it comes to urban design matters. So what we can do is have further conversations with applicants as well as with those other municipalities throughout the county whenever they do have applications coming forward about these particular items. So we definitely will look into this and include this as part of suggestions moving forward.
Great. No, I appreciate
I can add something to that too.
Want to have in terms of like the solar versus white painting versus like green, you have like plants and vegetation on top. And I would definitely look for you all to kind of give guidance to others around the county as sort of part of our paying it forward and helping out.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Warner, you had a comment?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. David Warner, Principal Counsel. I just wanted to add that also under the new zoning ordinance as amended recently by the District Council, detailed site plans where we identify issues related to actual buildings and structures now require conformance with our applicable functional master plans, which include requirements concerning things such as solar and other related issues. So that will also be helpful when applications proceed under the new zoning ordinance.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay, other questions for staff? Thank you all. We'll turn to Mr. Haller, who is representing the applicant. You can introduce yourself and any members of the team as appropriate. Take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. Thomas Haller, attorney with offices in Largo, and I'm here today representing Pack Trust, which is the owner of the property and also the applicant in this preliminary plan of subdivision. With me today are several members of our team. I have Mr. Scott Hodson, who is with Pack Trust. I have Mr. Paul Woodburn and Mr. Mike Novi with Atwell, who are our engineers on the project, and I have Mr. Mike Lenhart, who is our traffic consultant. First of all, I would like to thank Ms. Gupta for her thorough presentation and her review of the staff report and the issues. As always, she did a great job in putting all of the issues in context. As she noted, we are in agreement with the staff's recommended conditions with the two minor changes to conditions 3 and 7 that are in your backup. As she noted, the proposed subdivision is for the purpose of building up to a 80,000 square foot industrial building, a Class A warehouse. But there's more to this application than just that. There's a little bit of a history and context to it. And I'm going to, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask Mr. Hodson to address the kind of the broader picture here that it is involved with this application. But before I do that, I would like to ask if we could have page 10 of the applicant's supplemental materials pulled up so that the board can see them.
All right, give us a sec.
Actually, it'd be page 11. I can see on there, it's page 11. That's great, thank you. So many of you on the planning board remember when Safeway had a distribution facility on Cabin Branch Road before they moved to Collington. And many years before relocating to Collington, Pac Trust was working with Safeway to help them manage many of their properties around the country. Pac Trust was originally started in 1972. After Safeway moved to Collington, Pac Trust acquired the Cabin Branch Distribution Center from Safeway, and that acquisition included the subject property, the property which is part of the subdivision application. You can see on the screen where the Cabin Branch and Distribution Center is on the east side of Cabin Branch Drive, and then you can see the proposed building on the subject property, which is referenced as Building H on this aerial photograph, on the west side of Cabin Branch Drive. You can, excuse me, you can also see that the property which is the subject of this application is within a pocket of heavy industrial properties which are on the west side of Cabin Branch Drive. That area is mostly zoned heavy industrial and has been the site and still is the site of concrete recycling facilities, rock crushing facilities, asphalt plants, etc. The only access to which is a private right-of-way on the west side of this property, which the applicant does not own and does not have any control over. And so the goal in this particular case is to provide access to Cabin Branch Drive. So with that bit of background, I'm going to ask Mr. Hodson to turn on his microphone and to give you a quick overview of the Cabin Branch Distribution Center, how it functions, and the problems he has been challenged to address, and how this property will help him do that.
Thank you, Tom, very much. Are you hearing me before I proceed?
We can hear you fine.
Thank you so much. So Cabin Branch Distribution Center, as Tom shares, is the follow-on redevelopment of the Safeway Distribution Center, which occupies approximately 50 acres on the east side of Cabin Branch Drive, represented by the 8 buildings that you see immediately across from Building H in this drawing. This particular site has been redeveloped over the last 22 years to be the home of several both private industry and public and government agencies. About 50-50 of that. A brief summary of the tenants of Cabin Branch Distribution Center would include the United States Senate, the architect of the Capitol, Library of Congress, Whole Foods in 2 facilities, the successor to Recall in the public storage of records, Iron Mountain, and then Carrier Refrigeration and Taylor Refrigeration. Also, Children's Hospital maintains a warehouse facility here for stocking of their medical facility. There's a little bit of history on this that I want to be able to share that kind of helps to understand the reasoning behind how we've approached the development plan for this property. Cabot Branch Drive along the entire frontage of Cabot Branch Distribution Center is no parking on either side of the street. Currently, it's 2 lanes of traffic with a little bit of room at the shoulders. A bit of room at the shoulders has been increasingly used over the last 10 years by third-party truckers who are headed into this neighborhood, with, we estimate, 60 to 70% of those trucks representing inbound third-party trucks going to Whole Foods distribution facility. That distribution facility, if you're looking at this drawing, is the second from the top of the 8 buildings in Cabot Branch Distribution Center. So approximately the second building above the proposed intersection here. A couple of years ago, Councilmember Ivy reached me and challenged us to try and find a way to eliminate the illegal parking that was occurring on this street, at least to the extent the portion that represented activities on our property. We surveyed traffic and concluded that most of the traffic that was parking here was related, at least what we could mitigate, was related to the Whole Foods inbound trucking operation. And so we came up with a kind of a 2-pronged approach to trying to address this problem. The first approach, create a destination for those inbound trucks that would be utilizable by these trucks, and then additionally to revisit the design of Cabot Branch Drive in a manner that would essentially push the traffic curb tight in both directions and turning lanes in the middle of it to essentially eliminate the opportunity for this illegal parking to occur without literally stopping traffic. Along the way, we had an existing tenant here, EP Henry, which is a structure building blocks company, yard products for the most part. And they leased the entire facility, and we worked with EP Henry to surrender a portion of their facility to try and get some of this traffic up off the road immediately. Unfortunately, because the traffic needed to come down Cabot Branch, down Sheriff, and then to the very end of the private road, which really doesn't function like a public road. It's an entrance to a heavy industrial recycling and crushing station. So we had very poor uptake of the utilization of that parking, and so we continued with our design here, and we aligned the entrance for the proposed building H to the main entrance to Cabot Branch Distribution Center. That we should note when looking at the drawing here is that at the Sheriff Road end of the project, we are below grade about 10 to 12 feet along that frontage. And the first entrance to Cabot Branch Distribution Center occurs at the proposed intersection for new building H, as we call it. That our guard shack for nighttime operations occurs. One unique aspect of Cabot Branch Distribution Center is that during night times and weekends, all of the traffic that's coming and going from the center is brought through one single gate to enhance security and control access to the property. So the plan here essentially would, in our opinion, allow us to proceed to be able to lease to Whole Foods space where these third-party trucks could come in and essentially not have to be circulating, trying to find a place to wait. Many of these trucks are coming long distances and need to wait for their time at the dock. And so we have proposed to Whole Foods a strategy in which they would take a portion of this property to use for the waiting of those vehicles.
Mr. Hodson, I don't mean to interrupt, but if I could ask staff to move to image 12, that might help you with your description.
Thank you, Tom. And so this is just pulling in closer, and you can see that the proposed bridge to this lines with the main entrance to Cabin Branch. You see the guard shack there for Cabin Branch immediately in the background to the right, which would be the east side as you enter the main campus of Cabin Branch. And you can see here that we've proposed an area where at the top line, the Whole Foods inbound trucks could come into the property, cross the bridge, be in their positions here waiting for their time at the dock, and then when they come forward, essentially pull to the intersection, pull through the light, straight forward to the guard shack. They would make access to the Whole Foods facility for their appointed dock times. And so a portion of the site has been proposed for that use. The remaining portion has been proposed for Building H, which would be a modern industrial building. One just general comment about access to the site from Cabin Branch Drive. In addition to this being, sort of necessary to comply with law, it's also essential to be able to move this property to sort of a higher level of industrial use, that the property have an appropriate front door, and for us that it reasonably associates itself with the remaining operations at Cabin Branch Distribution Center. The analogy I shared in a previous public meeting would be that we would be building a beautiful new home, but putting the front door of that home on the alley of the back of the property, because that's really what the private road is. It's an industrial access way. It has way stations and is constantly having traffic from inbound trucks. So we simply would not be able to justify producing a modern industrial building. We're not in a position to be able to achieve a reasonable front door that would be appropriate for our typical business customers. Tom, I'll pass it back to you.
Let me just ask if you could show Exhibit 13 as well, so that Scott can mention the building.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I should have covered that. So on 13, you can see what the entrance to this property looks like as you come across the bridge. The bridge is about 47 feet across, from little bit over 47 feet. To the viewer, really just looks like a continuation of the private road network, and allows the building to be visible at from Cabin Branch Drive. And with the introduction of the traffic signal, it would, number one, calm traffic on Cabin Branch Drive, but number provide for more controlled and safer turning movements in and out to the existing Cabin Branch operation, as well as the proposed new Building H. The buildings themselves look very much like the existing buildings at Cabin Branch. The ceiling height on this building, I believe, is proposed to be 32 feet, which would accommodate the types of uses that we've historically had at Cabin Branch Distribution Center. One note, because we talked a little bit about reflective roof here, the types of roofs that we use at Cabin Branch historically are EPDM, which are essentially a rubber-based product. That product itself is dark, almost black, and so what we do here for these types of buildings is to put ballasted river run rock on top, which holds the roof down. But that river run rock is relatively light. If we were to return to the aerials, you would see that. But it is not white. The reason that we use EPDM roofs is because TPO roofs are typically not as durable, and they are not resistant to hail, which is a significant risk at this property. In response to Cheverly's question regarding solar, we did voluntarily offer up, and I'm sure Tom will share in the rest of his presentation, but since it's germane to this question of roof type and color, we did offer to voluntarily upgrade the design for the building to essentially accommodate for an additional 5 pounds per square foot to accommodate solar, should that become a desirable use in the future. And so while we can't predict what the existing tenant will want to do with the building in response to inquiry we increase the capacity to accommodate. Tom, I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hodson. And I do want to, note to the planning board that, as was discussed, this property has for literally decades been used as more of a heavy industrial site, similar to the properties around it. And, one of the big limitations on the ability to elevate this property to more of a light industrial use and a higher, a better use is access. And so we do view this as an opportunity to begin to transition some of the area on the west side of Cabin Branch Drive to a higher and better industrial purpose. And this driveway that you see on this image is key to that. And I do want to also emphasize, I put in some copies of some statutes. As staff noted, I know there's been some question raised about utilizing that private right-of-way. But I did want to note for the record that literally the land use article, state law, requires that properties have frontage on and access to a public street unless the county council, through its legislation, authorizes use of a private right-of-way. And as Ms. Gupta indicated, the zoning ordinance under section 27-466.01, which is applicable generally to industrial properties, requires, just as the land use article, frontage on and access to a public street, unless there is authorization to approve a private right-of-way in subtitle 24. The provisions for approving private rights-of-way are in section 24-128 of the subdivision regulations. And if you review that section, you will see that there are about 19 specific circumstances under which the planning board can approve a private right-of-way through the approval of a subdivision, but providing access to an industrial use utilizing a private right-of-way is not one of them. None of the provisions of section 24-128 would be applicable to allow this property to access that private road as its primary access. And we cannot develop this property as proposed without approval of a subdivision. And so we find ourselves in a position of having to pursue the crossing that you see in front of you. And so that is the plan with regard to this property. And as Mr. Hodson also noted, there is the additional goal of providing a space for the trucks which currently park regularly along the side of Cabin Branch Drive to have a place of respite before entering into the distribution center. And that is an issue that has been brought to his attention, has kind of been front and center of his plans on this site for a couple of years now. And that has involved conversations with local governmental officials, as well as Town of Cheverly. And throughout this process, Scott has been in meetings with Town of Fairmont Heights, as well as the Town of Cheverly, that have occurred before and during the entire application process. And we are going to continue those interactions with the municipalities moving forward. And we have always made it clear to the town and supported this with our actions that we would take part in any meetings that the town requested. And our outreach has included Scott, who is actually based in Portland, Oregon, flying into town for 3 of the 4 meetings that we had that were referenced in the town's letter. But we believe that this also demonstrates the importance that we have placed on communicating with the town and working with them cooperatively to address their concerns. I do also want to touch on some of the issues which the town raised in their letter of July 18th. Ms. Gupta reviewed several of their points that as they related to subdivision issues, but there are a couple of points that she mentioned were outside of the subdivision review process. And I do want to take a minute just to indicate to the board our response to those comments as well. With regard to, while Ms. Gupta did indicate that the staff has reviewed the proposed stream crossing and has found that it minimizes environmental impact to the fullest extent possible, I do want to note that there were 3 types of stream crossings that we evaluated in this case. We looked at the possibility of an in-stream culvert, which is kind of a standard way of crossing a stream. But that has probably the largest environmental impact. The second option that we looked at was a bottomless arch, which has lesser impact than a bridge, but does require that there be some riprap and stone put in the floodplain as a permanent impact. And then the third alternative was the construction of a bridge, which completely spans the stream and has no impact on the stream. As we went through the process and worked with the town, we committed to them that we would build a bridge in this case, the one with the option with the least environmental impact. And we have modified our proposal for impacts to the regulated environmental features that your staff reviewed to provide for the construction of a bridge as opposed to the construction of the bottomless arch. And so the request for approval of impacts before you are the impacts associated with the least environmentally impactful means of crossing the stream. So I did want to point that out. With regard to the fourth paragraph of the town's letter with regard to annexation, I would note that the subject property does not abut the existing boundaries of the town. As the crow flies, it's approximately 1/3 of a mile away. But the town has expressed an interest in annexing several industrial properties, including the 50-acre Cabin Branch Industrial Distribution Center, which you saw on the prior images that Pac Trust owns. So this is a much more complex issue than just annexing a single parcel that abuts the town and will involve other properties and other property owners. Pac Trust has told the town it will continue to work with them regarding any proposed annexation and will consider the benefits that would result from annexation. The town has also asked us to participate in local business association, in a local business association. As we have discussed with the town in several circumstances and meetings, Pac Trust has been a member of the larger industrial property owner community for over 20 years now, and it considers itself to be a good steward of its property. One of the things that Scott did not mention is that Cabin Branch Distribution Center is unique. Even though there's 8 buildings and there's multiple tenants, it's not like some industrial centers where there is a fence around each industrial building. What Pac Trust did in this particular instance was they worked with their tenants to provide fencing around the entire facility, which allows the interior of the facility to be open and allows them to provide security. As Scott mentioned, there's one particular point of access that in the evening and on the weekends has a guard gate and security to ensure that all the tenants are well protected. And so it has one of the reasons why Pac Trust has been able to attract the quality of tenants that they have in that distribution center is because of the work that they have done to make it secure and clean and well maintained. But with regard to the town's request, Pac Trust would be happy to work with a larger group of similarly situated property owners to improve the safety and functioning of the larger business district in the area. We share the same concerns as all of the other property owners and are more than willing to be a partner in that effort. I think paragraph 7 was another one that Ms. Gupta said is not necessarily a subdivision issue. I do want to note this is the paragraph where the town requests the developer to work with the Green Infrastructure Committee and Friends of Lower Beaver Dam Creek regarding landscaping issues, invasive species, and mitigation. With regard to both of those issues, we have told the town that we will do an inspection of the stream buffer for the existence of invasive species. We will remove any invasive species that are found, and we will replace those with native vegetation to ensure that only native vegetation exists within the stream buffer. We've also indicated to them that to the extent that we have an off-site tree mitigation requirement, we will work with the town to identify sites within the immediate watershed. And if those sites conform to the requirements of the Woodland Conservation Ordinance can be approved by your staff, we would be happy to provide our tree mitigation within that same watershed. Scott, the 8th paragraph. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Somebody had muted. You're fine. Keep going.
Okay. With regard to the 8th paragraph about the rooftop solar panels, Scott just indicated to you that in response to the town's request, he is going to construct the building to make sure that it is structurally capable of accommodating solar, which will encourage a tenant from doing it, not being financially impeded because the structure of the building would have to be upgraded. With regard to the on-site lighting and being consistent with dark sky standards, we have indicated to the town that we'd be more than happy to comply with providing dark sky lighting on site. And we've also indicated to the town with regard to the bathrooms that we will work with the tenant to make sure that bathroom facilities are available for the trucks that are given an opportunity to leave the property, leave the roadway and beyond the property and outside of the roadway. And by providing the bathroom facilities, we should also be able to provide the water bottle stations that the town has requested. And then the next item 10 is the air quality monitors. Just to provide a little bit of background to the planning board, Town of Cheverly has entered into a partnership with the University of Maryland and the Maryland Department of the Environment for the voluntary placement of air quality monitors on properties in and around the town. And the town has asked Pac Trust to host a monitor, and Pac Trust has agreed to do so. Scott has been in contact with the University of Maryland with regard to this, and I would note for the record that the intention is for the air quality monitor not to be located on this property, but rather to be located directly across the street in the Cabin Branch Distribution Center, because the guardhouse that we have there is a building that is totally under our control and also has internet and electricity that would allow us to install the monitor there, as opposed to putting it on a building that is leased to another entity that we don't have full control over. And so that is something else that we've agreed to do. And then the final point I think I wanted to mention, that staff mentioned this as well, is that they had asked us to consider permeable pavers in the parking areas. Several of the board members may remember that this historically was the West Brothers Brickyard. And the reason it was a brickyard is because it's a clay site, and the permeable pavers do not work in a clay site. In fact, the stormwater concept plan that we had approved by DPI, which requires us to provide 100% water quality volume on site, requires us to do it through an underground storm filtration system. They do not want water permeating into a clay site in proximity to the slopes of Cabin Branch. So while that is not something that we can do, it's not out of because we aren't willing to do it. It's because of the unique nature of the soils on the site that we are working with. So that will conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about any of these specific issues. And I know we do have somebody else who signed up to speak, and I'll be glad to respond to any questions that result from any of those comments as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Haas, as well. Commissioners, questions for the applicant? I've got one. Thank you all. I've got one. Can you talk a little bit about your commitment to the 8-foot, the bike ped, this sort of the trail realignment, and part of the reason why I'm bringing it up is because when I heard from Mr. Hodson that part of the solution to the traffic issues or the parking issues was to essentially narrow the road, and I'm trying to understand how that fits in with the trail that's being proposed as well.
Well, I'm sure I'm happy to do that. So as part of trying to figure out what to do with these trucks, if you've driven down Cabin Branch Drive, as Mr. Hodson indicated, there's 2 lanes of traffic in one lane in each direction, and then there's a wider than normal shoulder, if you will. But that wider than normal shoulder is being used by trucks parking on the road. And if you go by there at certain times of the day, there's sometimes trucks parked on both sides of the road, and it, quite frankly, it's a little bit scary to maneuver your way through there. And so we've worked with Public Works to figure out how to address that. And so the idea is to remove that wider shoulder and to provide a lane that, as Scott indicated, is curb tight. So it goes right to the lane that will allow us to provide a center turn lane And then that center turn lane will make it safer for trucks to be able to turn into the facility. So it's not a matter of necessarily making the road more narrow. It's a matter of striping it so that there isn't an opportunity for the trucks to park. Providing the parking on this property, I mean, if we don't provide the parking on this property, but we stripe the road, then those trucks are going to end up in the community somewhere. We don't want to do that. But what we've talked to DPI about is because of the heavy truck traffic and having the trucks curb tight, there's really no opportunity for a bike on road bike lane. So what we've worked out with Public Works and what they've indicated that they will approve is the 8-foot side path. It'll be in the right of way, but it'll be protected from and outside of the travel lane. And so that's what the DPI has approved and that we have committed to construct.
So when you say separated from the travel lane, are you talking about some kind of physical barrier between? So this will be a dedicated bike ped lane that is separate from the roadway?
It's going to be outside the curb. Instead of a sidewalk, we're going to have an 8-foot side path. With regard to, I could ask Mr. Woodburn if he has the details of what the distance is between the curb and where the actual side path is. One of the things that we do have to be somewhat careful about is the proximity of the stream in the environmental areas in terms of trying to go any further to the east. But I don't know if Mr. Woodburn.
I think that this is Paul Woodburn. I think to simplify it, it's a standard.
Mr. Woodburn, before you go, were you sworn in?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Keep going.
Yes. Let me try to tie that a little bit together for Tom. So it's new curb and gutter will be placed along the property frontage, and the 8-foot side path will be behind the curb and gutter. So that's the way it's protected.
Okay. All right. So it's a protected bike ped lane.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep.
That's all I have, Mr. Haller. If there's no other questions for commissioners, we will turn to our speakers list. I believe we only have one person signed up to speak. That is Mr. Smith. Dan, you on?
Yes,
there.
I'm on.
Mr. Smith, how much time do you think you'll need?
Well, 5 minutes would be great, but I can try to be shorter than that. I don't think
5 minutes is plenty. The applicant actually spoke for a good chunk of time, and broadly defined will give parties of record similar amounts of time. So you can take a bit of time that you need, and we'll start the clock just to help us keep track of it, but no pressure. Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I'm Dan Smith. I live in Cheverly. And I just want to be clear that while I am a member of the Cheverly Green Infrastructure Committee, I am here not representing that body. I'm here representing the town. I'm here representing myself, and I'm representing Friends of Lower Beaver Dam Creek, the nonprofit stream watershed education and advocacy group that I helped found about 15 years ago. And I'm still I'm the president currently. And one of the things that, I would like to thank the applicant for the meetings and the effort that have gone on, and that some of the accommodation that's been done to look at the bridge, to listen to recommendations that have been made. I do appreciate that. I want to acknowledge that. I think that I could support this building for many reasons, with some changes. And let me back up for a second, because just hit some of the fundamental premises that are upon which this proposal is based. We have Kevin Branch, the applicant has described as scary. We will have semi trucks, you might have a half a dozen on a Sunday afternoon. Just last month I was out there, they're lined up there. They're waiting to get into the property that is controlled entirely by the applicant. Where's the county enforcement? I mean, the simple problem, or the simple solution to that problem, is enforcement of the existing law. This planning board and development process has clearly approved uses at the existing property, the existing Cabin Branch distribution site, that are over capacity. They don't have the space on site to serve the purposes for which they are charging rent and establishing a huge amount of profit for the Pac Trust Realty Network, which prides itself in its literature of being sustainable and really environmentally conscious. Okay, so we have an issue, I would say, fundamentally with how the county has looked at this. Look at that site in the previous map there. It is wall-to-wall buildings at 80,000 square feet. There's not adequate buffers around there in this day and age for mitigation of the heat island effect of this that's impacting the whole region. Now they want to go across the street, and the proposal to solve a parking problem on Cabin Branch is to put in an 80,000 square foot building with new needs for, obviously, to be served by a new capacity of trucks. And we'll add some there, which will include cutting some of that buffer of trees that's there to put in parking for those other trucks that are illegally parked. And we have that really nice picture of looking down that bridge. And I wonder, will the requirement, when this is approved, as I'm sure it will be, will the requirement demand that, like say, there is no truck parking to be allowed along that entrance private road? Because of course, he said, we need to have it presentable curb view from the road to the building. But I think my fundamental concern is really with, we agree, I think everyone agrees that the uses that are existing industrial, the crushing and all those are dirty. They're really inappropriate in such an urban setting. And we need to figure out a way to transition to better uses. And my time's almost up. Well, I need a little bit more. So that private street,
Mr. Smith, take your time. You're not under any time pressure, so keep going.
That private street, I think, is the key to this whole thing. And I mean, if it's not legal to use it now for what they want to put in building H, how is it legal for the existing uses that are there? They're grandfathered in by some way, but we've got like 3 or 4 other properties. That's the only access. And so therefore, we can never develop those to any higher upgrade until we have a public street there. You'll never be able to convert those uses to something because there's not an access. So you think you have to find some way, and there's not physically a way to connect them to the street. So if we ever want to solve that, we've got to use this road. So whatever it takes, turn it into a street. We didn't ever see a consideration of the millions of dollars that are going to go. We understand that one of the highest costs for this project is that bridge. What about using that bridge to that street? Just around the corner where Prologis and Amazon built, county required them to build a public street there because it was in the master plan. It was a road to nowhere because it dead ends at a forest conservation area that is by law unable to have a road go through it. But it was on the plan, so that the driveway into the Amazon Prologis building that was built 2 years ago is a public street because it was in the master plan. Yet in that same transportation master plan, there is a dedicated off-road bike path along Cabin Branch that goes and eventually would connect. But no, that's on the master plan of transportation. That was never required. Oh, we've got other extenuating circumstances. So we don't have to build that. You don't have to do that, but you have to build this road. So I'm pointing out some things that I think are really frustrating about volunteer citizens trying to be engaged in this process. When we're trying to look at the overall effect, building H here in that area, yes, it's in zoned industrial. It was not always this way. Yes, there was a brickyard. I think the bricks out of there built the Pentagon. However, in just the last few decades, we had 67 acres of forest there. This was mostly second growth, some mature hardwood forests that are identified in the Anacostia Watershed Tree Conservation Plan from 30 years ago as prime habitat that should be protected and enhanced. We lost that piece by piece because of the decisions of this planning board and by the piecemeal development of owners who thought they were doing good, but just kept cutting down our forests. So we need some different approach. And what is just really disappointing, we have a Cheverly Green Infrastructure Plan, citizen generated. It's very comprehensive. It was done 12 years ago, adopted by the town as policy. It's advisory. I mean, we don't have the legal teeth to enforce that. It's a guidance thing. That should be recognized as like an award-winning, it should be praised by the planning board. It should be noted. It should be referenced when development occurs around, but it's not. And in fact, I have a question to the planning board staff and to the developer. Has any inquiry and involvement in this review by Sheila Sallow, the head of the Green Infrastructure Committee in Cheverly, has any of that been inappropriate and out of line? Because the town of Cheverly this week sent her a letter saying that she had been insubordinate, that her actions are a liability to the town, and that she was being removed from the Green Infrastructure Committee because of that. Why am I airing this dirty laundry of Cheverly here? I'm doing it because the way the system is set up, we have infighting at the community level over issues that are ridiculous. We should be all working together and channeling our energy for the development to improve this whole area. This building and project could be part of that. It's going to, I think, move the needle a little bit. It could move it a lot further. 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, there was the presentation of the Environmental Justice Commission of Prince George's County, January 10th, 2020, just before the pandemic. High-level people, David Harrington from the Chamber of Commerce, high-level people from the Department of Environment, from planning, park and planning, outside people, Mr. Hawkins from the County Council. Their findings clearly state that the development process in the county is structurally unsound, or it's got problems. There are structural, systemic injustices. These are environmental and public health injustices. What was the #1 area that they showed in here as a problem? This area, south of Route 50. This is an area that has chronically been underserved and misserved and misused. And what I'm wondering is, where are you, planning board and council and staff, the staff and leadership, on implementing the recommendations that there be a master plan of environmental and public health justice that projects like this would have to go through, or at least a rubric to help address some of these issues? That report said these communities around here should have deserved additional resources to plant trees, to do other health initiatives. Where are those? I feel like we're here, I feel like before a tribunal that is like kind of like making incremental improvements, but really we're just doing the build out of like the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Today it's going to be 105 degrees, at least effects. 6 months after, 6 months after in 2020, after this, we approved the development of the Amazon warehouse, 170,000 square foot building just around the corner from this, on a 17-acre site, which had 4 or 5 acres of forest on it. It had specimen trees. They were approved to clear cut those. They all went down, in just within weeks. 2 acres in the floodplain. This was after 6 months after one of the worst floods we've seen in Cheverly that flooded and caused tremendous property damage to private property. It had buildings along Columbia Park Road underwater. Route 50 was flooded entirely.
Mr. Smith, let me jump in a sec. I hear the passion loud and clear. I do want to redirect you back to the project, though, with any questions, concerns, comments you have specifically about this project, okay?
And so what I'll just say to connect the dots there is that the planning board and the staff are not being very helpful in the big picture to connect the dots. We have flooding on Route 50 that is it's a huge safety issue. It's a huge, completely shuts down Route 50. That is just down the road from this. And it's because of Cabin Branch and things. This property itself here, coming back to it, I applaud, PAC Trust for its policies on environment and for its keeping its property there in good shape. It didn't do that with this property that's being developed here. These parking spaces there, it's still there. I mean, the parking is still there. It's got weeds and stuff growing. That was used for employee parking. So the employees of Safeway came on this access road for many years, parked. There's a footbridge across the stream at the same location as this new proposed one. That bridge, I believe, nobody ever even mentioned that in this presentation. It is still there. The foundation is there. The concrete deck is still there. I think it's just a little rehab. It would be an excellent pedestrian bridge. You could park here, walk across, the employees still have the access. The condition of the buffer is there's trash, excessive amounts of trash. And the stream is already under stress because the floodplain was compromised, as Mr. Haller said. As the building, the bricks and things have dumped. So there's a huge amount of fill there, which requires, I think, you can't get the building any closer to the stream because it's not stable. But so I'm saying there needs to be requirement for clean property owners here, and you, Park and Planning, all your properties, your forests are in horrendous condition in terms of invasive species and the quality of the impact. And this is in a county which we have the worst record for loss of forests in the entire state. We are causing, the state to go downhill in terms of it trying to meet its tree planting, no net loss of forests. And this and other projects aren't helping us regain that. So that's a lot of venting, but I'm here as a volunteer. It's really hard for a community like Cheverly, which doesn't have the staff to be able to look at this stuff and we have to rely on the staff of the county and planning.
Gotcha.
We would like you to be more advocates for us and for the future people who have to live through climate change in the coming years. And we just don't feel like we're getting that right now. We don't have the resources to advocate for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. We've no one else signed up to speak. Mr. Haller, I'll turn it back over to you for any rebuttal. Can I just say and then close? Just there are a few points that Mr. Smith brought up that I wouldn't mind you addressing as well. One is what are you gonna, is your client gonna allow parking along the new road and the bridge? I was curious about that. I assume the answer is no, but there's an enforcement issue there. And then the other one is there any strategy for pushing for something to do for either making public or at least negotiating with the folks around this private street down the road and providing access for that as well? I'm curious about that. Those were the two that stood out that feel pertinent to what we're addressing here. Commissioners, any other things that you want Mr. Haller to address, or any responses to Mr. Smith? Okay, all right, Mr. Haller, floor is yours on rebuttal and then close.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. With regard to the question about the parking, you are correct. There would be no opportunity for trucks to park on that new driveway coming into the site. It wouldn't be wide enough to allow other trucks to come in and out, and we would certainly not allow anybody to even try to do that because it would impede access to the site. So rest assured that no parking will be allowed along the bridge or on that driveway leading into the site. The site is being designed specifically to allow trucks to be able to easily maneuver on site so that would not be an issue. With regard to the use of that private driveway, Mr. Smith kind of alluded to it. I think that driveway has been there for many years, and many of those uses there, or some of those uses, I think, are non-conforming, and I think really that's the answer to it. Now, we do not, as I've indicated, that the right of way that the road exists on is privately owned. I do not know, and I could ask Mr. Hodson to jump in on this, whether there's ever been any conversations with them about their willingness to potentially dedicate right of way in the future. But I don't believe that that's something that I know. I've never been in a discussion with them about that. I think that's a bigger issue. And I don't, again, one of the issues would be if it was to be converted to a road, it would have to be reconstructed. And I don't know who would take the responsibility for that, because I don't think the county would want to assume that responsibility. But Scott, do you have any insight on that?
No, I don't. This is a privately owned road to a very high volume crushing and recycling operation. We don't own it. And as Mr. Smith correctly says, this was used for the Safeway parking lot for their employees in the past, but has not been owned by Safeway or Pac Trust, and we don't immediate control over that. We just have a right to pass to the parcel that we own at the rear of the property. I'm not aware of any conversations or any movement towards trying to produce a public road here.
All right, thank you for that. And so, Mr. Haller, you're still on rebuttal and then close. And while you may have thoughts and reactions to much of Mr. Smith says, I would ask you to keep your rebuttal and close to things that are despite the power of what was said, keep it to the things that are focused on this application. And so, Mr. Haller, back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I really don't have anything more to add. I think that from the purpose of the issues that are germane to this application, it's relatively straightforward. Mr. Smith is very passionate about the issues that he spoke about, and he and I have had conversations in the past about it, and I totally appreciate his concerns and his passion. And as he spoke about, they're bigger and broader than this one particular site. But we are doing everything that we can to try to bring this project in and be as responsible with regard to the environmental issues and concerns as we can. And so I know that Pac Trust has demonstrated over the years of its ownership of the adjoining distribution center its commitment to maintaining a clean and secure project and property, and the same commitment will be extended to this side of the street as well. I do believe this is an opportunity to begin that transformation that we talked about, possibly the upgrading of this road at some point to a public street. But at this point, this is the best that we can do given what we control and the limitations that we have based upon the limited land area that we do control. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, to us, this is a deliberation, and if there's no deliberation, then I would look for a motion. But commissioners, any thoughts, comments, reactions?
Just
I had a comment. Unless, were you going to speak, Ms. Washington, to make a motion?
No, I was just going to thank everybody for their comments, and
Okay.
especially Mr. Smith and his passion. But go right ahead, Commissioner.
Okay, I was just going to make a comment to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, I understand your passion, and I think most of us on the planning board feel the same way with respect to the environment. And, you know, it also requires the citizens to take action. The county has programs to help green the area. For example, they can get credits by planting trees. They can get tax rebates by installing permeable pavers. They can tax rebates or tax credits and by removing asphalt. So I understand your passion, but there are programs in the county currently that homeowners can take advantage of, not only homeowners, but commercial establishments as well. So that's something that you might want to consider with your neighbors and the like to look into these programs that are managed by the Chesapeake Bay Trust. That's all I had to say. And thank you for everybody's participation.
All right, any other comments on deliberation, commissioners? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve preliminary plan 4-22065 and TCP 1-010-2023, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and as further modified by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Good, huh?
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Haller. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Ms. Gupta, as always.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Next item on our agenda is item 7. This is a detailed site plan DSP 20003-01- Mill Branch. We have Mr. Lynch, who is representing the applicant. We have Ms. Gupta, who is will provide the staff report as well. This also is an evidentiary hearing. So if there's anyone who wishes to sign up to speak, if there are any folks who will be speaking, I'll need to swear them in. Mr. Lynch, anybody on your side? Mr. Minor, you're going to be speaking?
Yes, sir.
All right, and I don't think we have anybody else. So Mr. Minor, or actually, that's not true. Mr. Lynch, are there other folks on your team who I need to swear in?
Probably not, Mr. Chair. They are here just in the event there's any questions of the board that I cannot field.
Okay. All right, then, Mr. Minor, please raise your right hand, and do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I hesitate to interrupt. Edward Gibbs, an attorney with offices in Largo. I am registered on this case and to speak. I represent the owner of Mill Branch Crossing, the overall project, and the dash-in site is located within that. They are a lessee. And I do also have our civil engineer, Kim Morgan, who is signed up and is with us this morning. I doubt very seriously that she will need to say anything, but perhaps she should be sworn just to be safe if there's a question that she needs to ask. And Mr. Lynch and I are aligned in our positions. But I am here and will participate. So just wanted to let you know that.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gibbs, for the clarification and for speaking up. So, Ms. Morgan, why don't we ask you to step on just in case? You don't have to show your video, but at least acknowledge that you're hearing me. I'm not hearing anything, Mr. Gibbs.
Interesting. She was on. So
No, if it comes to it, we'll swear in at the appropriate time. So,
sounds good.
thank you both. So with that, let's turn to staff for a brief presentation. Ms. Gupta, floor is yours.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And I've changed my caps. Good morning. Again, members of the board. For the record, I'm Ridula Gupta with the Urban Design section. Item number 7 on the agenda is a detailed site plan DSP-20003-01 titled Dash in Mill Branch, which proposes an amendment to the original DSP-20003 for construction of a gas station with a 4,809 square foot food or beverage store. As a matter of housekeeping, the additional backup includes exhibits received prior to the July 25th noon deadline. One exhibit received from the applicant and one from the representative of the property owner, Mr. Gibbs, requesting revisions to the recommended conditions and findings. The applicant requests revision to condition 1C related to curation of archaeological artifacts, condition 4 related to the street lighting along US 301 Service Road, and finding 6 and condition 5 related to a retaining wall. Staff is in agreement with deletion of condition 1C since the curation of the archaeological artifacts has been completed, and we have confirmed that. After consultation with the City of Bowie, staff is in agreement with the revised language for condition 4. Staff, after discussion and agreement with the applicant, proposed to delete one sentence from finding 6 that's located on page 7 of the staff report. It's right at the bottom of this page, which states the face of the retaining wall will be articulated with a brown and black textured architectural finish to complement the materials used for the convenience store building. The purpose of deletion of this sentence is that staff has become aware that the retaining wall in fact is in construction as we speak, and the wall does not look like the way I described it in the staff report. That's the purpose of deletion of the sentence. For condition 5, staff and the applicant have agreed on revised language. If it pleases the board, I will read into the record. So the new language will essentially it adds one phrase to the condition.
Please.
Okay, thank you. So the revised condition 5 will read, prior to the approval of a building permit for the retaining wall, detailed site plan DSP-20003 shall be amended with a slip sheet to show the offsite grading and the retaining wall and its details on outlot 16. So the only change is addition of the phrase with a slip sheet.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. So that addresses the letter we received from the applicant. So the exhibit from Mr. Gibbs, who represents the property owner, also proposed revisions to finding 6 on pages 7 and 9, deletion of condition 1A, 1C, 4, and 5. And after discussion with Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Lynch, staff does not support deletion of condition 1A, which relates to a public utility easement incorrectly shown on the detailed site plan. So condition 1A will remain. As stated earlier, staff is in agreement with deletion of condition 1C related to the curation of archaeological artifacts. Condition 4 will be revised as proposed by the applicant's exhibit as discussed earlier. Condition 5 will be revised as read into the record. Finding 6 will be revised by deletion of that one sentence I stated earlier discussing the material and finish of the retaining wall. So that completes the revisions to the findings and the conditions that have been discussed with the applicant, the applicant's representative, and Mr. Gibbs. In conclusion, based on the findings presented in the technical staff report, staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings, including revision to finding 6 as stated, and approve this detailed site plan TSP-20003-01 and type 2 tree conservation plan TCP2-044-2021-01, subject to the conditions found in the staff report as revised by applicants Exhibit 1 and revised condition 5 as read into the record by staff. This would conclude my presentation. However, I would be happy to provide additional detailed presentation if required. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. Commissioners, questions for staff? No questions. We will turn to the applicant, Mr. Lynch, and also Mr. Gibbs.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Dan Lynch with the law firm of McNamee Hosey here on behalf of Dashin Food Stores, Inc. I'm joined today with representatives of Dashin Food Stores, Inc., including Brian Fenwick and Tony Williams. And then we also have Miss Mary Gansert with Butler Engineering, who's the project manager on this case. I'd like to begin by thanking Ms. Gupta with regard to bringing this application to the board with the recommendation and approval and conditions that both Mr. Gibbs and I find to be acceptable. We've been working on these, trying to get over a number of issues, and she's been very helpful. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Hunt as well as Mr. Warner, participated in those conversations and helped us kind of tweak some of these conditions so that they work with both us and the property owner and park and planning. Again, this is, Ms. Gupta indicated, this is a Dashin food store and gas that we're proposing on this site. This is the first commercial parcel being developed as part of the overall Mill Branch development. We have been working on this for quite some time, and I think with the input of Ms. Gupta, I think we come to you with a plan that is probably superior to what we originally submitted to Park and Planning when we first started this process. But with that, I'm in agreement with Ms. Gupta's comments with regard to the amended conditions, and be happy to answer any questions the board may have with this. I'd also like to note, I do appreciate my colleague, Mr. Gibbs' participation. He was also very helpful in kind of addressing some of these issues, especially with regard to condition 1C. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions this board has with regard to this application. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? No questions. I'm a bit confused. Mr. Lynch, you're representing the applicant. Mr. Warner, I certainly want Mr. Gibbs to speak if he can. I'm just trying to figure out in what capacity he's speaking.
He represents the property owner.
This is not part of the public hearing process. This is still all part of the broadly defined applicant's team, right?
Correct. The owner applies, and then Dan Lynch represents the entity that's going to lease the property or is leasing the property, and they're the agent for the owner in this application. Yep.
I'm just thinking about our process. So, Mr. Gibbs, do you want an opportunity to speak as well?
Just ever so briefly, I would reiterate, first of all, Edward Gibbs, an attorney with offices in Largo. I represent Green Branch LLC, the owner of the broader Mill Branch Crossing development, of which this application is a part. I just would say that I would agree with Mr. Lynch relative to expressing thanks to Ms. Gupta, Mr. Hunt, and Mr. Warner for sort of massaging some of the issues in these conditions. I also, on behalf of the property owner, agree with the revisions read into the record by Ms. Gupta, and I would have nothing further to add. And other than to thank Mr. Lynch for working with me on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Which is no other questions for the applicants. Mr.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have one question. I'm sorry, I may have missed it. Is there the dash in the gas station? What provisions are you making for electric vehicles? If any?
I can address that, Commissioner. We have an agreement with the city of Bowie that will provide 2 electric vehicle charging stations on the site.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good to hear. There's no other questions. The applicant, I will open up the public hearing portion of this, and we have Mr. Minert representing the city of Bowie. Mr. Minert, take it away. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. I'm Joe Minert. I'm the City of Bowie Planning Director. To indicate that the City Council held a public hearing on this application back in March. We also had advisory planning board hearing, and the City Council voted to recommend approval with conditions, all of which have been included in the latest plan revision or within your staff conditions. There was one condition that was related to off-site lighting that the city would like to see, and that has been addressed in your condition number 4 as revised by Exhibit 1. And so we're in support of the staff recommendation, and that concludes my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Minert. We have no one else signed up to speak. I will close unless there's any final rebuttal or close from you, Mr. Lynch or Mr. Gibbs, which I doubt.
No further, nothing further.
Thank you. So with that, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, we're under deliberation. Any thoughts, comments, reactions, questions? If not, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the revision to finding number 6 as read into the record by staff and approve DSP-20003-01 and TCP2-044-2021-01, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and is further modified as follows in applicant exhibit number 1. Delete condition 1C, revise condition number 4, and condition number 5 shall be revised as read into the record by staff.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Keith, both your respective teams, and thank you, Ms. Gupta again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item 8 on our agenda. This is preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22060 National View. We have Mr. Antonetti representing the applicant. We have Mr. Diaz-Campbell, who will be giving the staff presentation. We have a number of folks who are part of the applicant's team. I think we have one other person who signed up to speak, Mr. Owens, Fort Washington Forward. So this is an evidentiary hearing. So we'll be requiring those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. And so at this time, I would ask all people, excluding the attorneys, all people who are intending to provide testimony to raise their right hand. Mr. Owens, that would include you if you're on the line.
I'm here.
Okay, great. So I'm assuming your right hand is raised, and do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. I do, and I hope you can hear me.
Yep, we can. Okay, I've heard everybody. Consider you're all self-sworn in. We'll start with Mr. Diaz-Campbell for a brief staff presentation, then we'll hear from Mr. Antonetti. Mr. Diaz-Campbell, good morning and take it away.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, I am Eddie Diaz-Campbell, Planner 3 with the subdivision section. Item number 8 on the agenda is the preliminary plan of subdivision for National View 4-22060. The subject project proposes 19 parcels for development of 1,562 multifamily dwelling units, including 362 dedicated to senior housing units and 71,918 square feet of commercial development. The preliminary plan of subdivision is supported by and subject to Approved certificate of adequacy ADQ-2022-067. The site is also subject to conceptual site plan CSP-21004, which was approved by the planning board in May 2022. As a matter of housekeeping, there's one item of additional backup for this case, which is an exhibit with the applicant's requested revisions to recommended conditions of approval. Next slide, please. The site is located in the western part of Prince George's County within Planning Area 76A and Council District 8. Next slide, please. More specifically, the site is located on the north side of the Capitol Beltway, approximately 1,100 feet west of its interchange with Maryland 210 and adjacent to Bald Eagle Road. The northern portion of the property, where the map shows undeveloped single-family detached lots, is located within the town of Forest Heights. Next slide, please. The zoning map shows that the site is in the residential multifamily 48 or RMF 48 zone. Property is bound to the west by land in the reserved open space zone. West of the property is land in the agricultural and preservation zone. North of the property is land in the residential single-family 65 zone. The Capitol Beltway lies south of the property. The property zoning notwithstanding, this preliminary plan subdivision was accepted for review under the prior zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, which were effective prior to April 1st, 2022. Under the prior zoning ordinance, this site was in the mixed-use transportation-oriented, or MXT zone. The preliminary plan subdivision was evaluated according to the standards of that zone. Next slide, please. The overlay map shows that the northern tip of the property is within the Intense Development Overlay, or IDO zone, associated with the Chesapeake Bay critical area. Under the prior zoning, the property was in the previous version of the IDO zone. The area of the site within the IDO is not proposed to be developed and will be discussed further in this presentation. Next slide, please. The aerial photograph shows that the site is currently wooded. A historic site known as the Butler House is located on site. However, it is in ruinous condition and so is not easily visible on the aerial. The aerial photo also shows that the property is bound to the west by the Oxen Cove Park and Oxen Hill Farm National Park, and to the east by additional parkland. North of the property are single-family detached dwellings in the town of Forest Heights. South of the property is the Capitol Beltway, and though not visible in this aerial, beyond the Capitol Beltway are National Harbor, the Oxen Hill Park and Ride, and additional commercial and office uses. Next slide, please. This photo shows an overview of the site from an aerial perspective. Next slide, please. The site map shows that the site has a hilly topography. The southern portion of the site have the highest elevation, while the site sloping downwards towards the north as one. The southern portion of the site have the highest elevation, with the site sloping downwards towards the north as one travels towards the town of Forest Heights. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The master plan right-of-way map shows that the site is adjacent to the Capitol Beltway, a freeway, and Maryland 210 and Maryland 414, which are arterial roads. No right-of-way dedication is required with this preliminary plan. Next slide, please. The preliminary plan shows 19 parcels outlined in red. Streets are shown in blue, with adjacent public rights-of-way in dark blue, and private rights-of-way within the subdivision in light blue. For the 19 parcels, 7 of them are proposed to be developed, while the remainder will be private street and open space parcels. Parcels 1 through 4 are proposed for mixed-use development, while parcels 5 through 7 are proposed for multifamily senior housing. The site layout features a spine road known as Private Street A, which connects to Bald Eagle Road at the site's southern frontage. This street roughly follows the historic route of a previously existing roadway, also known as Bald Eagle Road, which used to connect to the District of Columbia line. At the northern end of the development, Private Street A ends next to Parcel 7, and from there, a proposed shared use path, shown in orange, connects between the developed areas of the site and the residential area of Forest Heights. Next slide, please. With the application, the applicant submit a request for a variation from Section 24-128B12. This section requires a 10-foot wide public utility easement, or PUE, along at least one side of all private rights-of-way. The slide shows in pink the locations of proposed PUEs. The applicant has proposed PUEs that are 7 feet wide and which are mostly located within the private rights-of-way, rather than alongside them. There is also a short section of private street B which is proposed to have no PUE. These deviations from the requirement need a variation in order to be approved. Staff is recommending approval of the variation request, as discussed in finding 9 of the technical staff report. Next slide, please. This development is subject to mandatory dedication of parkland. The applicant has proposed on-site recreation facilities to meet the requirement. On-site amenities conceptually proposed by the applicant include community gardens, a commemorative exhibit for the Butler House Historic Site, a pocket park, terrace green space, courtyards with terrace seating, 3 observatory building platforms, 7 fitness centers, a dog park, previously mentioned shared use path, a picnic pavilion, furnished urban retail plazas, and 2 swimming pools. At the time of detailed site plan, the proposed amenities will be evaluated to determine which ones will qualify as recreation facilities, meeting the mandatory dedication requirement. Staff found that the site design presents an opportunity for a linear park, which connects between Forest Heights and National Harbor, which would be formed by the series of open spaces shown in the central image on this slide. Staff is therefore recommending that at the time of detailed site plan, the amenities and recreation facilities provided be evaluated to ensure they are public-facing to the extent practical, so that they can contribute to linear park. The detailed site plan should determine which areas of the site, if any, will be actually made open to the public, as opposed to being open only to residents and visitors. Any areas open to the public will need associated public use easements or community association covenants establishing the right of the public to use the spaces. Next slide, please. The next 3 slides show street sections for private road A provided by the applicant. The slides show the vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle circulation proposed along this road. Private road A is proposed to have 2 vehicle travel lanes, 1 in each direction, as well as a bike lane, which would allow north to south travel. An 8-foot wide sidewalk is proposed on the east side of the roadway. This slide shows the proposed street section adjacent to the plaza on parcel 3. The 2009 Master Plan of Transportation recommends that a public natural surface trail run through the subject site, approximately along the route of private street A. In consideration of the property's rezoning to MXT for high density and high intensity development, and the resulting need for more robust infrastructure to accommodate a high volume of pedestrians and bicyclists, staff is recommending that this master plan trail be provided as a 10-foot wide public shared use path. Specifically, staff is recommending that the shared use path be provided on the west side of private road A, in lieu of the bike lane, in order to allow for 2-way bicycle traffic on the path, and in order to complement the proposed sidewalk on the east side of the roadway. The sidewalk and the shared use path which serve different roles, with the sidewalk used by local pedestrian traffic within the development, and the shared use path used by pedestrian and bicycle traffic, taking advantage of the regional connectivity provided by the Wild Hider Trail Network. Staff's recommendation notwithstanding, staff has agreed to work with the applicant at the time of detailed site plan to determine if an alternative facility to safely convey pedestrian and bicycle traffic along private road A would be appropriate. The specific design of the facility should consider the site grading and compatibility with the adjacent retaining wall the applicant plans to construct, as well as the intention to safely separate vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic, all of which can be expected to move at very different speeds on the site's hilly terrain. The applicant proposed a revision to condition 10 of the preliminary plan in order to allow further analysis at the time of detailed site plan, with which staff agrees. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the proposed street section adjacent to the plaza on parcel 1. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the proposed street section adjacent to the senior housing building on parcel 6. Next slide, please.
Keep going.
This application is subject to the Woodland Conservation Ordinance and a revised Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan, TCP 1-009-2022-01, was submitted with the application. This slide shows the property boundary in red, rights of way in blue, buildings in yellow, tree preservation area in bright green, and woodland preserved but not credited towards tree preservation requirements in light green. The original TCP 1-009-2022 was approved alongside the conceptual site plan, and there are no significant changes between the two plans. The woodland conservation requirement is supposed to be met with 2.6 acres of on-site woodland preservation and 3.05 acres of off-site woodland credits. There are no regulated environmental features or prime management area on site. A variance for removal of 21 specimen trees was approved with the original TCP1. Next slide, please. In conclusion, subdivision staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve preliminary plan subdivision 4-22060 National View, as well as Type 1 Tree Conservation Plan TCP1-009-2022-001, and a variation from Section 24-128B12, subject to the conditions contained in the staff report. The applicant communicated proposed revisions to the conditions of approval recommended by staff, which are included on the record in applicant's Exhibit 1. The revisions include the previously mentioned revision to Condition 10 regarding the recommended shared use path and other more minor changes. Staff is in agreement with the applicant's proposed revisions. This concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Commissioners, any questions for staff? No questions. We'll turn to the applicant. We have Mr. Antonetti. We have Ms. Scudder as well. Is Mr. Antonetti?
That is correct. Good afternoon, Chair Shapiro, members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Robert Antonetti of the law firm of Shipley and Horn. Today with me is my partner, Arthur Horn Jr., and our senior land planner, Mr. John Ferrante, as well as co-counsel, Ms. Tracy Scudder. Together, we are pleased to represent the applicant in this case, Harbor View Development, LLC, regarding this preliminary plan application. Today with us, we have members of our development team, including Mr. Eli Borick and Mr. Andrew Clamon, representatives of the applicant, Mr. Tom Matea, consultant project manager, Mr. Torben Agason, Nick Snyder, and Kevin Mack with Dewberry, our civil engineers. We have Mr. Mike Patton from DBIA Architects, the architects for the project, and Mr. Michael Lenhart with Lenhart Traffic Consulting. Before I proceed, I would like to thank Mr. Diaz-Campbell for his thorough review and detailed staff report. As always, he was very professional to work with, and there's a lot of work that goes on bringing an application from filing through review to staff report to the board, and really being in agreement with staff is evidence of the collaboration and hard work that goes into review of such an application. Mr. Diaz-Campbell did a phenomenal job in bringing together the different parts of staff's review together with the applicant to come before you today with a recommendation I think hopefully we can all support. As you are aware, this is the fourth entitlement for the National View project. There has been a rezoning that was approved for the property, which rezoned the property to the MXT zone. There was a conceptual site plan which came before the board, which was approved, which approved a range of 1,465 to 1,870 dwelling units and up to 289,000 square feet of commercial development. There was a conservation plan, which you heard. It was also heard at the same time as this conceptual site plan, which was approved, showing a portion of development, recreational amenities, essentially in the IDO portion of the CDCA that impacts this project. So today's preliminary plan application further refines the development proposal for a mixed-use project, proposing, as you've heard, 1,562 total multifamily units, including a maximum of 362 elderly units within that total. It also proposes 71,918 thousand square feet of commercial development. Again, this refinement does reflect a reduced density from what the CSP approved. That's part of the process. And the next step in the process is a detailed site plan. Further details about buildings, architecture, FAR, total units, parking, landscaping, lighting, recreational facilities, locations, and some of the things we've heard about today regarding trail design, shared use path, pedestrian, bicycle connectivity will be further refined at time of detailed site plan, which will come back before the board, which we look forward to bringing before you. We do also request support of the variation from section 24-128B12 of the prior subdivision regulations requesting reduction of the 10-foot PUE to 7 feet. As stated by Mr. Diaz-Campbell, I believe staff is in support of that. And as shown in the findings of the staff report, we do meet the criteria of approval for such a reduction. In sum, we do support the staff's recommendation and conditions, with the exception of several revisions to the conditions as set forth in the backup materials posted for this case. We believe staff is in support of those changes. And with these changes, we respectfully request that the planning board approve this preliminary plan and associated variation. And our team is here to answer any questions that you may have. And we do thank you for your consideration. And to the extent it's appropriate, I would reserve a few minutes for rebuttal based on any further testimony that comes after my presentation.
Of course, Mr. Antonetti. So we've heard from the applicant, representative of the applicant. Commissioners, any questions? All right, so let's turn to our speakers list. For the public hearing portion of this, we have Mr. Owens, I believe is the only person who signed up to speak. Fort Washington Forward. Mr. Owens,
I'm here.
Take away. The floor is yours. How much time do you think you need?
Not very long. I'm working right now, so I'm doing 2 or 3 different things at the same time.
Are you riding your bike while you're working and talking to us?
Not in this weather. I'm Dave Owens from Fort Washington Forward. I'm the president of Fort Washington Forward. Chair Shapiro, want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. To the rest of the commissioners, also thank you for the opportunity to speak. There is a lot of, you might be thinking Fort Washington is a little bit of a ways away from this area, but I can tell you that the residents of Fort Washington, you know, have had our eagle eyes on this development for a while. We believe that the Oxon Hill Road corridor is critical, it's important, and not that far from Fort Washington, 5-6 miles, if you will. So this is really important. There's a lot of support for this development in the area of Fort Washington. The residents we speak to are very excited about what we've seen and what we've heard. One thing, though, that is top of mind, and I would ask the developer this question, is just what are the road infrastructure and traffic infrastructure plans to accommodate this development? That's a question we get all the time. In particular, in the areas of Oxon Hill Road, where this area sort of swings by Topgolf, Oxon Hill High School, etc., and where the Beltway sort of comes in. So that's a question we get a lot, and I would pass that question on to the developer. We would even invite them to come out and explain that, if possible, to our community. We have a lot of community forums and we can set that up, or we can come and talk to you about that so that we can explain that to our constituents. The reality is, and I'm gonna, you know, sort of reference what Mr. Smith said earlier, Dan Smith from Cabin Branch. You know, these reports, we've gone through them a couple of times. They're very dense. They're very difficult to understand if you're not in the know, if you're not a lawyer. And so it's difficult for regular residents to understand what are the traffic infrastructure plans to accommodate developments like this. What are the traffic studies? What have been done, et cetera? How will you get in and get out of this area? So that's really important. So we would, again, like to invite the developer to have that conversation. And we hope that that can happen. And lastly, just hoping and not hoping, just asking the question, how will, because we hear a lot about bike lanes and things of that nature. Mr. Shapiro, you know that's important to me and some of our other constituents. You know, the Maryland 210 pedestrian bike study is underway, and it looks great, but what's the connectivity with that, this development with the Maryland 210 pedestrian bike study? So I guess at the end, just to reiterate, there's a lot of positive energy and response to this development. We appreciate it, but traffic road infrastructure and how it's going to connect and sort of align with the Maryland 210 pedestrian bike study is top of mind. We would like to have a conversation with the developer if possible, whether it's by phone, by forum, by whatever. We'd like to have that so that we can clarify that for our constituents. Besides that, appreciate the time today as always, and stay cool, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Much appreciated. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Owens before we turn to the applicant for any rebuttal and then close? No questions. And Mr. Owens, I'm sure the applicant will address a number of your questions and concerns as we move to rebuttals. Nobody else signed up to speak. So Mr. Antonetti, you and your team, you have rebuttal and then close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just briefly comment, and then I think I'll ask the representative of the applicant, Mr. Eli Borick, to mention a few points in rebuttal or in response, really. We do appreciate Mr. Owens's enthusiasm for the project. We absolutely share it. This is a fantastic development of this property, which abuts the town of Forest Heights. It's inside the Beltway, so its primary connection and primary impact in and out of the site is on Bald Eagle Road, which leads to the interchange with the Capitol Beltway. Those intersections were studied. There are conditions of approval to make turning movement improvements leading into the site, which are set forth in the certificate of adequacy. And we will make those as part of the APF findings and requirements for the development of this site. We'll show details as to what those look like as we move forward to detailed site plan. With regards to bicycle connectivity, this is a multimodal project. It's a mixed use, so it offers the opportunity for live, work, play, where you don't have to get into your car to go everywhere, to necessarily go shopping, to go to a grocery store, which is our intent, to find tenants such as that to add to the commercial aspect of this project. And you can get on your bike or walk on the pedestrian trails that we'll be offering, or the shared use paths for either bicycles, either on road or side path, to connect to the trail network, which is extensive around this property and in the vicinity. So we look forward to making a contribution to that connectivity. Also, that network would lead to the park and ride for WMATA Park and Ride, which is nearby, which we are making our on-site connectivity to that network that would allow folks to access that site as well more easily. So with that, that's the way we are addressing kind of traffic and connectivity concerns, and further details regarding that will be shown at time of detailed site plan. We would be willing to meet with Mr. Owens and his group, either by phone, virtual, or however is most appropriate. Again, we want to capture that enthusiasm from his group and continue to have their support as we move forward through detailed site plan. And with that, I would like to turn, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, just for a few minutes to Mr. Eli Borick on behalf of the applicant who wants to share a few thoughts on these items.
Of course. And Mr. Borick, were you sworn in?
I was not yet.
All right. Hold on one sec. Okay. All right. Do I see you? Where are you? You're on audio only. It's okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Consider yourself sworn in and take it away.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Mr. Owens, I first wanted to apologize that we haven't connected with you and your organization already. We have done a significant amount of outreach, and I'm sure that was just an oversight based on sort of geographic location, as you were saying initially. As Rob said, we are more than happy to talk with you, any constituents you have, members of your organization, about this and any other concerns that might be raised. We also have our traffic engineer, Mike Lenhart, on with us today as well. He may be able to address some of the capacity questions briefly today, as well as in a follow-up with you all. But as Rob said, our goal for this development is to connect to surrounding resources, whether that's MGM, National Harbor, or the Park and Ride Station. We're looking at things like designated bike lanes and shared bike lane markings, as well as connecting to the Capital Bike Share Network. We're also intimately familiar with the sort of set of trails that exist and that are planned for the area, and we see National View as sort of a key connector of the existing trail network. So again, we're happy to talk with you further offline. I would like to turn it over to Mike Lenhart just very briefly to say a few words about capacity, and looking forward to speaking with you further.
Thank you. Turn to Mr. Lenhart. Mr. Lenhart, you were sworn in?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay.
Good morning.
All right. Good morning.
Good afternoon, I guess.
Yes, indeed.
We did conduct a traffic impact study that was scoped with your staff, and identified a number of intersections along Route 210, there at Bald Eagle Road, and the off-ramp from southbound 95, Bald Eagle Road down to Route 414, Oxon Hill Road, and then several intersections along Oxon Hill Road. The traffic impact study was reviewed and approved, and based upon the approved ADQ certificate, was determined to meet the requirements inside the Capital Beltway. The adequate public facilities requires a level of service E or better. The study intersections will operate well within those thresholds with the approval of this project and the addition of the traffic. We have various bicycle and pedestrian improvements that we're required to look at, and we will be working with the review agencies and permitting agencies and developing plans and moving forward with those. It includes bike share stations, bike signing, and additional improvements as such. And so there is capacity, and there will be capacity to handle this project. And again, it has been vetted and reviewed and approved by your staff and by the county and state through the review process.
Thank you, Mr. Lenhart. Mr. Borick, appreciate your contributions. And with that, Mr. Chair, I think we responded to Mr. Owen's concern, but again, I want to emphasize we are willing to meet with this group and appreciate their level of activity in this greater Fort Washington region. And again, we hope to continue to have their support as we move forward to a detailed site plan. And with that, again, we thank you for your consideration of this request. We do, again, agree with staff's recommendation on this case, including findings and conditions as modified by the applicant's exhibit in your backup. And we thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Thanks to you and your team. So with that, I will close the public hearing. And commissioners, we're under deliberation. If there's any questions, comments, thoughts, reactions, if not, I'll look for a motion.
Hey, Mr. Chair, can I ask one quick question?
Who's speaking?
That's Mr. Owens.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Owens.
I'm sorry.
Sure, I'll allow it. Go ahead. What do you got?
Just wanted to know when that traffic study was done. That's a question that we'll always ask. And was it done during the COVID time and should it be updated to reflect non-COVID traffic patterns is something that is probably a question that you're gonna hear a lot of out here. And then besides that, that would be the only question that I would have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Owens. Mr. Antonetti, I know we have closed the public hearing, but I'm going to allow this. Mr. Antonetti, do you want to reply to that real quick?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Owens, the study was dated May 9th, 2023. It was not done during the COVID shutdowns, and it was done during the periods while schools were in session. So all counts are within the appropriate period for and are relevant and recent.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Antonetti. All right, commissioners, we're under deliberation. Any other questions or comments? If not, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve preliminary plan 4-22060, TCP 1-009-2022-01, variation from section 24-128B12, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and is further modified by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion on the motion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Mr. Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Thank you, Mr. Antonetti, Ms. Scudder, the rest of the team. Much appreciated. All right, moving right along. We're going to go to item number 9, DSP 20002, Jaksun Buddhist Temple. We have Ms. Scudder, who is representing the applicant. We have Mr. Shelley, who will give staff presentation. I believe that there's going to be a request for a continuance on this, but let's turn to Mr. Shelley real quick. Floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair. Are you able to hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Thanks for checking.
All right, great. Thank you. For the record, my name is Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. The item before you is item number 9, detailed site plan DSP-20002 for Jaksun Buddhist Temple, which seeks to develop a 4,625 square foot place of worship and maintain an existing single-family detached dwelling as a parsonage. On June 22nd, 2023, the Prince George's County Planning Board held a public hearing for detailed site plan DSP-20002 Jaksun Buddhist Temple. The Planning Board voted to continue the public hearing until July 27, 2023 for the limited purpose of obtaining more information about a proposed metal carport shown on the applicant's rendered site plan, which was submitted on June 20th, 2023 in conformance with the Planning Board's guidelines. The Planning Board also requested staff to provide the surrounding residents with the contact information for Prince George's County Department of Permanent Inspection and Enforcement, or DPI personnel, regarding their concern on the existing and proposed stormwater management for the site. Staff provided the surrounding residents who were registered speakers the contact information for DPI personnel on June 29, 2023, as demonstrated in Staff Exhibit 1. Staff Exhibit 2 demonstrates communication between staff and DPI personnel, where it was determined that the carport application has since been abandoned. Since the publishing of the memorandum on communication with DPI personnel, known as Staff Exhibit 3, the applicant informed staff that the metal carport will no longer be constructed for this project. Staff is available to address any questions regarding the communication process with DPI personnel, and this would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the staff presentation. Let's turn, unless there are questions, let's turn to Ms. Scudder. And I believe you're going to be requesting continuance on this, Ms. Scudder. Why don't you take it away, introduce yourself and take it away. We can't hear you, Ms. Scudder, I'm sorry to say. No, not yet. Still nothing. Yep, take your time. Commissioners, would it be helpful, we have a bit of technology, would it be helpful to take a 10-minute break, a little bit of a bio break? Okay, so it's 12:23, let's go until 12:30. And we'll be back, and Ms. Scudder, our technical staff will stay on the line to help you figure out your issue as well, okay? Okay, folks, we are gathering back together. Looks like we are all here. Let's give ourselves just another 30 seconds or so we honor that 12:33. Here we go. So we're back from a brief break. We're on item 9 on our agenda, detailed site plan 20002, Jaksun Buddhist Temple. We've heard from staff, Mr. Shelley. We're now turning to Ms. Scudder, and I believe you have a request for us and a little bit of background on that. Ms. Scudder, if you could introduce yourself and take it away.
Yes, good morning again, Chairman Shapiro. Sorry about those technical difficulties. Thank you for your indulgence. And good morning to the members of the Planning Board. For the record, Tracy Scudder with Scudder Legal, offices in Lanham, Maryland, and at the National Harbor. This morning, I have the pleasure of representing Jaksun Buddhist Temple, the applicant in detailed site plan 20002, which, as Mr. Shelley just advised, is a proposal for a place of worship to maintain a single family detached dwelling as a parsonage. I am joined today by representatives from the temple as well as their consultants who did a great job assisting with the processing of this application through the development review process. I'd like to thank staff, Mr. Andrew Shelley, for always being available for a call or a meeting and just helping me to get up to speed in this case. I'll be very brief. I entered this case approximately 2 weeks ago, tried to quickly get current on all the issues, watched the planning board hearing from June 22nd, and I understand that today we are here for a limited hearing to discuss one issue, that being the metal carport. That issue, as Mr. Andrew Shelley just explained earlier, is not an issue in this case. The metal carport is no longer being proposed by the temple, and they do not have anything pending with the permit office at this time. With that being said, the applicant respects the planning board's procedures, and since it appears that the one issue that was to be addressed today has been resolved, I have nothing further to present this morning. However, as you mentioned, Mr. Shapiro, I do have a procedural request, which is a request for a continuance. We're asking, well, the applicant is asking that this case be continued until September 7th in order to allow time to further discuss the proposed statue and the landscaping, screening, and fencing to address issues that were not considered previously by the planning board at the June 22nd hearing. And we would also ask that the continued hearing be renoticed. The temple wants to ensure that all persons of record are aware of the subject matter of the continued hearing. And with that all being said, that completes our request, and thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Scudder. So the request is, my understanding is the request is to continue the hearing. Do we have a date certain for that, that you're recommending, or staff? Mr. Hunt, do you have one?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the applicant as well as staff's in agreement with the September 7th planning board hearing.
September 7th. So then the ask is to continue the hearing to September 7th, and then two things. One is to expand the scope of the hearing to open it up to any issues that are essentially, we're renoticing the hearing and we're opening it back up for any questions or comments that folks might have. And in part, this is going to give you time and the Jaksun folks time to do more work in the community. That's correct?
Yes, although, we are happy with limiting the scope to just the items that the planning board has jurisdiction over. And I think the main issues in this case at this time that the planning board has jurisdiction over are the statue, the landscaping, screening, and fencing items that we want to discuss. So obviously, Chairman Shapiro, that's up to you if you want to open the scope wider. But as for us, we are looking for a more limited scope.
So I actually am looking to follow your recommendation on this. So the limited scope, the scope will be limited, and Mr. Warner, help to make sure that this makes sense to you too. What I'm hearing is the scope will be limited to issues related to the statue and related to landscaping and screening on the site.
And fencing.
Fencing. Okay. So commissioners, then what's before us again is a request for continuance, September 7th, change the scope of it and renotice it so folks in the public will understand and will have the opportunity to come and participate, okay? So with that, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the request to continue DSP-20002 to planning board date of September 7th, and that the new planning board date is renoticed and it is communicated that it will be limited in scope to include the statue, landscaping and screening and fencing issues only.
Okay.
Second.
Excuse me.
We got a motion by Commissioner Watson, a second by Commissioner Dorner. Yep.
I think so. I think I beat Quick Draw. He was still coming back from break a little bit too.
I was eating my blueberries.
So we got a motion by Commissioner Watson, a second by Commissioner Dorner. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0 for the continuance. Thanks, Ms. Scudder. Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Folks in the community, I imagine we will be hearing more from you on September 7th, and glad there's more opportunity for engagement from the community and from the applicant. Thank you all.
Mr. Shapiro, if I may, my name is Paula Price. I'm president of the South Laurel Civic Association. We thank you for your time. I am listed as a speaker. I'd just like to note that we not limit the scope of this due in fact that there is new evidence that we are attempting to introduce into this process that includes a survey that was done by the neighbor next to the temple, Leah Johnson, who's on the call as well. We have new evidence, as we did the last time that introduced the carport that wasn't before the commission, that we'd like to reintroduce, and just hope that we don't have it limited to just those few items and that we expand it to include the actual property, the survey lines, and other issues that we've come across since the last meeting.
I appreciate you stepping in. We have limited the scope of the hearing. I imagine in conversation with the applicant, you'll be able to address some of these issues. But we've already taken that action, and this is at the request of the applicant. So we're working off of the request of the applicant for the continuance and for the limited scope. So with that, thank you very much for jumping in, and let's move on to the next item. Next item is item 10 on our agenda. This is community planning assistance to municipalities and communities. We have the Cottage City Community Center for feasibility study. We have, hold on, let me get my paperwork. We have Daniel Sams and Fred Sakura who are going to be giving us a brief presentation on this. Take it away, team.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board. For the record, this is Dan Sams with the Community Planning Division with a presentation on the Planning Assistance to Municipalities and Communities program. Today, staff will provide an update on 2 recently completed projects and present a new project for fiscal year 24 funding. Next slide, please. As most of you know, PAMC, a longstanding program, was reinvigorated in 2018 with annual funding by the County Council. So almost $1.5 million has been invested since then on 25 projects, many undertaken using consultant expertise. These short-term projects produce timely plans and studies for subjects municipalities, communities, and organizations are interested in most. 2 projects, as I said, were completed in the previous 2 months. The first I want to talk about is, next slide, please. An economic development strategy for the town of Edmonston, completed in May. Community participation, which included visioning and consensus building workshops, was an important part of this project. The strategy combines demographic, economic, and real estate data in a SWOT analysis, a community crafted economic development vision statement for supporting community economic development goals, and 12 action items in 4 priority areas for the town to implement. I just want to make sure no one from the town is here to speak. I know they were interested in it, but I don't believe so.
Mr. Sams, are you talking about Edmiston? Or are you talking about Cottage
Talking
City?
about Edmiston, I just want to make sure. I don't believe so, and we can move on to the next slide. The second completed project, the Accokeek Heritage Tourism Study, identifies heritage tourism resources in that community, the challenges they face, and provides recommendations to make them known or better known. Using best practices, the study developed common heritage themes and 34 action steps to enhance connectivity and accessibility without threatening the resources themselves or the community's quality of life. This study was completed this month, and I believe Judy Allen Leventhal of the Greater Accokeek Civic Association is here to speak about how GACA and their partners will be using this study. Judy,
Do we have Leventhal with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me speak, and thank you, more importantly, for the project and the PAMC program and the support of the planning board. Mostly it's a shout out, the help that we got from Wendy Erminger when she first contacted the local community, and then Dan Sam has been just fantastic in carrying it through. We had great experience with the consultants, and we've been busy getting the paper copy out to the main stakeholders, and of course it's online now. I hope you've all had a chance to take a look at it. I think it offers great potential to maybe do an end runner on some of the problems that were raised earlier by folks like Dan Smith, where sometimes people, especially those of us not in municipalities, kind of feel like we're left out here, where we are kind of left as far south as you can get in the county. But we're seeing this as a great resource. We're very pleased with it. The community is excited. We're looking forward to continuing to work with, especially our partners, Southern Maryland Heritage Area folks and the folks at the Anacostia Trails Heritage Area, as well as others that are doing this all the time. And we see this as a great way to continue to make good progress with, again, not compromising the great resources that we already have. So on behalf of everybody involved, I want to thank you all with our sincere gratitude for the Planning Commission and the work that you've done on our behalf. And we hope to continue to help get that work done, working with you on an ongoing basis moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind words, and thank you for all of your good work and leadership in the community. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
Mr. Sams?
Thanks, Judy. Next slide, please. So moving on to a new proposed project for fiscal year 24, the town of Cottage City has applied for a feasibility study for a small community center. The function of the community center would be to host community meetings and for limited indoor recreation. Proposed cost is $61,125. Next slide, please. The project site comprises 2 lots south of the town hall, adjacent to the town hall parking lot and fronting on Cottage Terrace. The project would document the site, development parameters, and determine the town's needs and users with input from the community, and provide conceptual design renderings. And staff are recommending releasing PAMC program funds to conduct this project. And I do believe Carol Richardson, the town manager, may be here to speak about their application. Hey, Carol.
Yes, I am available. Hello, this is Carol Richardson, the town manager for Cottage City. I just wanted to take a brief opportunity just to emphasize the importance of this project to the town. Cottage City is one of the port towns that includes Cottage City, Colmar Manor, Edmiston, and Bladensburg Road that are situated along the Anacostia River. Cottage City, although incorporated in 1924, has history going back to pre-revolutionary America, and was also a site of some of the battles of the War of 1812. It is also eligible for historic designation because of the cottage-style homes and the many examples of the Sears kit homes. Cottage City is the only port town that does not have a community facility such as this. So it will be an asset to the community in terms of supporting the community for activities and events within its boundaries. In addition, this project, Cottage City is landlocked, and this will remove a vacant property that has blighted the area for some time. And I wanted to make sure that the town and our commission had all the information they needed to assess the viability and feasibility of this project, hence our request for this funding. But I do thank you for your consideration of this project.
Thank you very much, Ms. Richardson. I appreciate you taking the time. Appreciate your comments. Mr. Sands, back to you.
Thank you so much. Next slide, please. And with that recommendation, this concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sands. So commissioners, what's before us, appreciate the update, by the way, on the other projects. And what's before us is a request to approve the release program on the Cottage City PMC project. Any questions or concerns? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman. Enthusiastically move to approve. Sounds like a great project.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion on the motion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Good night. Thanks, Mr. Sands.
I vote as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Sands, Ms. Richardson. Thank you for all the work that you do, and we're looking forward to progress on this exciting project. With that, we will move to item 11 on our agenda, which is a part and parcel with item 12. Item 11 is a waiver of the rules of procedure 4-19012, Enclave at Westphalia. We have Mr. Heath will give a brief staff's presentation. Mr. Haller we'll hear from as well. And we need to hear item 11 before we consider item 12. Start with Mr. Heath. Mr. Heath, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly now.
All right, thank you. All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Antoine Heath with subdivision section. Item number 11 on the agenda is a request for a waiver of the rules of procedure. And item 12 is a request for reconsideration for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19012 Enclave at Westphalia. The planning board approved the preliminary plan of subdivision on March 18, 2021, and the resolution was adopted on April 8, 2021. By letter dated June 26, 2023, the applicant's representative, Thomas Haller, requested a waiver of the rules of procedure, and if granted, a request for reconsideration for condition 17 of the resolution on the basis of inadvertence, furtherance of substantial public interest, and other good cause. The condition is related to vehicular access to the subject property. If the request for a waiver of the rules of procedure and the request for reconsideration of the preliminary plan are granted, staff will provide further analysis on the merits of the request at a later planning board date. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I just want to, Mr. Warner, help me out with this too, with this process. So if we act on this right now, all we are doing is allowing ourselves to discuss the request for reconsideration. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, you're being asked first if you wish to waive, or it's like the right term is suspend your rules, so that you can hear the request for reconsideration, which would otherwise not be timely if you didn't suspend your rules.
But if we do suspend our rules and we hear the request for reconsideration, we're not taking this up on the merits as of yet. We're not hearing the reconsideration. We're just considering the request.
Exactly. You're just considering the request to rethink that decision you made.
Okay.
But you won't be actually reviewing that decision unless you grant the reconsideration. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I think the first step, which is just to suspend our rules, I'm perfectly fine with commissioners, if that's all right with you. And I would look for do I take this up as an action of the chair, or do we need a motion on this to suspend the rules?
Need a motion.
All right. So I'd look for a motion to suspend the rules of procedure.
Move to waive the rules, Mr. Chairman, for preliminary plan 4-19012.
Second.
Got a motion and second to waive the rules, or you said suspend the rules? Mr.
I did
Warner?
say suspend, or suspend/waive.
Right, trying to get the words right. We have a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion, no discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo,
I vote aye.
Commissioner Joyner.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. So now what is before us is item 12, which is a request for a reconsideration hearing for a preliminary plan. And again, this is 4-19012 Enclave at Westphalia. Mr. Heath, anything you want to add to that, or your initial comments cover anything related to this as well at this point?
Yes, I didn't have anything additional I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heath. So Mr. Haller, we'll turn it to you.
Thank you once again. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the planning board. It is my great pleasure to have the last case before the August recess. I know that you are ready for that as much as I am. But this request that's before you, we submitted a letter on dated June 26, which gives a detailed outline of our.
Mr. Haller, I have to say for the record, we actually have item 13 on the agenda, so you're second to last.
My apologies then. So I get out a little bit quicker than you do. Anyway, I submitted a letter on June 26th that outlined our request for reconsideration in great detail. But the issue before the board is whether there is sufficient evidence to allow for reconsideration of condition 17 of the preliminary plan of subdivision. As I outlined in our letter, this site is somewhat unique in that it is a property. Many of you may remember it as the site of the old German orphans home, and it has always historically been accessed from Melwood Road, which extends from Route 4 from the south. But it is part of the Westphalia planning area, and under the Westphalia plan, a new road network was to be established, which exists to the north of this property, and then runs along the northern boundary of the property. If I could ask for page 2 of the backup to be put up, I think this is a situation where kind of a picture is worth 1,000 words.
We need the picture.
And what I would like the board to have an opportunity to see is the photograph on page 2. And as I just referenced, so this property, although it has historically been accessed from Melwood Road, is in the future to be accessed through the master plan road network just to the north of the property. And you can see 2 roads highlighted on this image, one highlighted in red, one highlighted in blue. When the application was originally processed, the preliminary plan of subdivision, staff originally recommended a condition that said that no building permits could be issued until the roadway outlined in red was bonded and permitted for construction. When we went to the planning board at that point, we expressed a concern about the timing of that because as you can see from the aerial photographs, this area to the north, which is part of the Parkside development, while it's been rough graded, it is not, the streets are not being built at this point in time. They are not permitted and bonded for construction. And we have no control over when those streets do get permitted or bonded for construction. So we're dependent upon another applicant, another developer, bonding those roads in order to access this property. And this property was approved, and a detailed site plan was approved pursuant to the provisions of the MXT zone. And so a detailed site plan, we knew the detailed site plan was going to be coming after us. And we also knew that the detailed site plan was only valid for 3 years upon its approval. So when this condition was originally proposed, we asked for an alternative to the staff recommended condition. And instead what we asked was that if the section of road outlined in blue were bonded for construction and permitted, that we could at least obtain permits in order to vest the subdivision. Now, if I could ask staff to go to the next page, page 3. You can see that where the development connects to Dower House Road extended, you can see that just as you enter into this property from the north, there are 3 townhouse units that are located on the west side of Dower House Road. And what condition 17 originally said, what was adopted by the planning board, was that the applicant could obtain permits to allow, once that section of road was bonded, to allow for foundations to be constructed for those 3 units in order to be to enable us to vest the site plan. And we thought at that time that that would be a more likely than not be a sufficient protection for us to be able to vest the site plan, even with that condition, we didn't control the ability to build that road. So we followed up, and the subdivision was approved with that condition. We followed up the subdivision with a detailed site plan, which was then approved in January of 2022. But then shortly thereafter, in March of 22, interest rates started to rise. Interest rates began rising in March of 22, and we've now just seen the 11th increase over the last couple of years. And so since that occurred, development in the abutting Parkside subdivision has dramatically slowed, and there have been issues with the ability to continue that development to the point where we are now a year and a half into the life of the detailed site plan, and we do not know when that road is going to be bonded for construction. And so what we are seeking to do is to ask that the planning board reconsider that condition to provide an alternate mechanism by which this detailed site plan can be vested. And if we go to that page 4 of the letter, you will see, and I don't want to get into the merits of the case, but you'll understand what we're seeking to do. As I mentioned before, the property has historically been accessed from Melwood Road, which is an existing road. It is not the road that the traffic from this subdivision will ultimately access. But you can also see on the image at the bottom of the screen that there is an existing driveway which accesses the old buildings that constituted the German Orphans Home, which exists and literally goes right by one of the sticks of townhouse units that were approved for this property. And so what we are going to be asking the board to consider is to revise condition 17 to allow us to obtain a building permit to install the footers of one unit in this subdivision, which would allow us to then vest the site plan should the roads to the north not be bonded and permitted by the time that the expiration of the detailed site plan occurs. What this would do would put the ability to vest the subdivision solely within our control and not be dependent upon another developer and the pace of their home sales coming from the north and from the west. As we had discussed in our letter, we believe, first of all, that there is good cause for this, and that it was a result of inadvertence and for other good cause, because other than potentially Commissioner Durner, I don't think any of us anticipated 11 increases in the interest rate since March of 22. And the impact that would have not just on home sales, but on the ability of the developer to obtain financing to build the infrastructure for the property to the north. This is something that had we known it was going to take that long, we would have maybe pursued other avenues at the time, but we had no way of knowing that. And I don't think the board had any way of knowing that. And then from the standpoint of addressing whether there is a good public reason, a public purpose for this request for reconsideration, I would submit that having a condition that forces the detailed site plan to expire would simply put the applicant in a position of having to refile the site plan, process the same application for the same project with no changes, simply to try to gain a new life for it. And there's really no public purpose in putting staff through that, putting the applicant through that, the time and the administrative expense of doing that. We are literally in a position where this project is shovel ready, but we can't build it until the roads are extended to us to the north. Even if we are able to obtain reconsideration of this condition, It won't allow us to build the development, but it will allow us to vest the site plan. And that's all we're seeking to do, is to find an alternative to the existing condition, which gives us a reasonable ability to vest the site plan in a manner that is consistent with the board's prior decision, and which gives us the ability to not have to go back through the process again. And I would finally note that clearly the board was willing and did in fact work with us when the preliminary plan was done to find what we thought at the time was a reasonable mechanism to allow for this to occur. But because of circumstances which have overtaken us that we didn't anticipate, we're in a position of having to try to look at a different alternative to be able to vest the subdivision. I'm happy to give you more information should you want it, but I think that pretty much summarizes what we're seeking to do at this point in time. And I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. So Commissioners, let me turn to Mr. Warner. I'm curious, I think it'd be helpful for me and perhaps helpful for all of us to have him explain. I mean, there's a high bar for granting requests for reconsideration. And I'd like Mr. Warner to sort of lay out what the criteria are. And I'm actually would be curious to hear his thoughts on, how we evaluate whether or not this meets those criteria. So, Mr. Warner, let me turn to, if there's no objection to that, Commissioners, Mr. Warner, let me turn that over to you.
Sure, thank you, Chair Shapiro. David Warner, Principal Counsel. You're correct. It is a high bar to reconsider a decision because planning board decisions are supposed to be final, and it's very important that they are final for all sorts of reasons, the right to appeal and other things that allow developments to continue. But we do reconsider cases, and when we do so, we have to make 3 findings. First, we have to find that the decision that we made was an error, and if it was an error, that error was caused by fraud, surprise, mistake, inadvertence, or other good cause. And if we find that, then we also have to find that correcting the error will be in the substantial public interest. So there's really 3 findings we need to make. It's sometimes a little difficult in our procedures to necessarily see that because it's all written as one sentence, but those are the 3 findings we need to make. So in this particular case, the first thing the planning board should do is try and figure out what mistake they made, what error did they make. The applicant is saying that your agreement to approve the condition that he asked for, which was to allow them to vest the DSP by putting in footings for 3 lots back when we agreed to do that in 2021, that was in error. But it was really just a request from the developer to give them some relief from the condition that the staff had required, which was that this project not commence until there's adequate roads to get to the project site in the north there. And the developer was concerned at the time, what if those roads don't get built? How about if they just build one? Can we vest? And the planning board said, okay, we'll do that. And now, for the reasons that he gave, that interest rates are rising, and we don't know if that's not why the roads have not been developed to the north, but he suspects that's why, that somehow the planning board's decision to accept his requested alternative was an error. So you'd have to find that. And it doesn't seem to me to be an error on our part. It seems to have been an error on the developer's part when he asked for the condition that he didn't take into account, I guess, that, that road to the north may still not be built. So that's the first thing you have to find is the error. And then he says that if you do find the error, you'll have to find that it was caused by your inadvertence or there's other good cause. I don't think inadvertence is applicable because inadvertence is defined as not paying attention to something. And I don't think the board could, there's any evidence that you weren't paying attention to anything at the time that you accepted their condition. But other good cause occurs when there's changes in facts, and we do have changes in facts from time to time that occur that make our decisions in error a result of the change in facts. Here, the change in facts is the interest rates changing in the market. That's pretty much an issue out of the control of the planning board or anybody at the time they make a decision. So third, and then you'd have to find that if you find the first two, that there really was a substantial public interest in granting this reconsideration. And there you start to kind of get into the merits of the case, which is, should this project move forward at this time? I mean, the roads aren't available for it, so it's never going to move forward until those roads are done anyway. And really the issue that the developer is trying to cure is the law that the county council has, which is detailed site plans are only intended to last 3 years. And then if they don't, and you're not ready to go, you're supposed to come back and we reevaluate the project. That's been the law in the county for at least 30 years. So, so that's kind of my background and how I see the request. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. I appreciate that. So commissioners, you hear what's before us. You've heard from Mr. Warner as well. I mean, my strong reaction to this is that while I feel for the applicant that I don't see an error in our part, and so I don't know how we get past that first threshold for granting the reconsideration hearing if there's no error. Market conditions certainly have changed, but that the change in market conditions is not an error on our part.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, hold on one second, Mr. Haller. Commissioners, I'm curious about this. Because I'm open to a little bit of back and forth from Mr. Haller and us and Mr. Warner, if that's okay with you all as well.
Yeah, I'm similarly aligned, Mr. Chairman, given that that's certainly the first threshold. And I was actually, when Mr. Warner was explaining it, he didn't use this word, but in other words, the condition that's in question is one that was proffered technically or negotiated by the applicant. I think I don't want to overstate or oversimplify what you said, Mr. Warner.
It was requested by the applicant according to our staff report. Yep.
Okay. All right. So Commissioner Giraldo and Mr. Haller, I will give you a chance to chime in as well, but Commissioner Giraldo.
I just have, I mean, I share the same comments with Commissioner Washington. I just don't see how it's our error. That's the problem I have, to get over that first hump.
Mr. Haller, you want to jump in?
I do. First of all, I don't think you can use the term error in a vacuum, because what the standard says in section 10E of your rules of procedure is an error in reaching the decision that was caused by fraud, surprise, mistake, inadvertence, or other good cause. I think you have to relate it to, well, what is the good cause? Because obviously at the time that we were working on this originally, we only knew what we knew. We didn't know what we couldn't predict the future. And so the error has to be put in some semblance of context. What the goal was, and what the board worked with the applicant at the time to try to achieve, was to not have a condition that would essentially prevent the applicant from moving forward with the project. And we did work with staff and work with the planning board at the time to try to achieve a reasonable condition that would not put the applicant in a position where it couldn't move forward. And that's why we were seeking a different mechanism from what the original staff recommendation was, to be able to move forward sufficiently with the project to at least be able to vest it. And so what we would suggest that the error was was imposing a condition that does not allow the applicant to be able to protect the detailed site plan that was ultimately approved. The other thing that I would say is Mr. Warner is right that detailed site plans have a life of 3 years, but detailed site plans, there are provisions that allow for detailed site plans to be vested. And we would be able to vest this subdivision, but for this condition. It's not about the detailed site plan. We wouldn't have an issue with being able to vest the subdivision, or excuse me, the site plan. As I indicated, the project is essentially shovel ready. We're ready to move forward with it, but this condition prevents us not. I mean, obviously, the road network prevents us from actually constructing it immediately, but the condition 17 prevents us from even being able to protect the approval that we have, and that's all we're seeking, is to protect the approval that we had. We think that that's consistent with what the board was agreeable to when the subdivision was approved in 2021. It's certainly consistent with the intent of what the applicant and staff were trying to do when we tried to fashion the condition when the subdivision was approved in 2021. But in looking at the circumstances that none of us were able to predict, it's clear that was an error. It's clear that it did not achieve the purpose that we were attempting to achieve. And to me, if the board is inadvertently put in a position where the very intent for which the condition was imposed is now frustrated, then that is an error. And so, obviously, had we known then what we knew now, we would have sought a different mechanism to try to achieve the vesting of the subdivision, but we didn't. And that is in fact what made the condition that was imposed an error, because it literally frustrates the intent of what the board was trying to do.
Okay.
Yep. Well, Mr. Howell, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I appreciate that and I empathize it. I guess I've stated my concern, and the rationale you mentioned, it gives me pause, because we would never, in other words, we would be reconsidering cases based on recessions, tornado, all sorts of things that we would not be able to predict, and certainly would not hope happens. I just worry about the precedent there. And again, you have your definition of error, and our council clearly has a slightly different one. So that's where I am. So.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Commissioner Washington, I'm in the same place you are. I'm quite sympathetic to Mr. Haller, and I think he's representing his applicant well. And, the change in market conditions, and even regardless of the intent at the time was there, that does not feel like it meets the high bar for granting requests for reconsideration. I just don't see it. As sympathetic as I am, I don't see how our procedures should allow that. Commissioner Geraldo, Commissioner Dorner, where are you all on this?
I kind of share your views and Commissioner Washington, as I said earlier.
Commissioner Dorner,
I understand Mr. Haller's position, the position of his client, but I'm always concerned about precedent and the way our council set forth the grounds for us to grant it. And speaking as he did about the error, I can't get over that hurdle.
Thank you. Commissioner Dorner?
I'm on the other side of the table. To me, it's not that we made an error in our analysis, and it's unfortunate that the condition was put into place to involve another property owner and developer in there. But to me, in terms of how the condition would be potentially resolved, it's not going to change the DSP in any substantial manner. It's just going to allow the project to go forward. And it's because of how it was written originally that prevents that, and prevents them from using the property rights as they could and kind of moving forward with what we approved. If we were sitting back in the day a couple years ago, looking at these conditions, and Mr. Haller were to say, hey, I don't agree with staff in terms of how the condition is written right now, I would like to rewrite it in the following way, I don't think there would be any sort of opposition to this. My view probably it doing so. It's okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because he didn't foresee that, and he didn't foresee the lack of development on the other side, I think that does establish good cause in there. And to me, the substantial public interest, although it's not even mentioned in the report here, is just the lack of housing supply. We have a dearth of housing supply that's driving up prices at the moment, and getting more projects on the ground started and going is going to help, hopefully, not push prices up more than what they've been increasing in the area. So I think there's a substantial public interest for developments like this to proceed if it's minor conditions. I don't think this would set necessarily a precedent that would open up any DSP or any sort of decision that we had made, because it's not rewriting the condition in a substantially different way. It's just tweaking it slightly because there was a lack of anticipation of how it was going to be applied and restricting the property usage of the developer and the owner of the existing property. So to me, that I think that's good cause. That it wasn't an error that was intentional on either side. He was trying to do something different at the time. It didn't work, and it wasn't very easy to anticipate that. So I'm sitting on the opposite side of the table in terms of how I view this.
All right, I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, can I address Commissioner Washington's concern about precedent and Commissioner Geraldo's concern about precedent?
Yeah, go ahead briefly, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this site is incredibly unique in terms of its circumstance. I understand the issue of talking about, in general, talking about economic conditions, global economic conditions being something that you don't necessarily want to use as a precedent. But in this particular instance, this is a property, as I mentioned before, that has historically accessed Melwood Road. Everybody knows that Melwood Road is a substandard road. And there was, and there has been numerous discussions about not putting traffic onto Melwood Road. So there was a different road network set up for this property. And we are being respectful of accessing that new road network. That puts us in a unique position, a position that we're almost never in. I can almost never remember a case that I've ever done where I had to worry about whether I could build a property because of a road to be built by another developer. There may be other issues with offsite road improvements, but that's on me. That's on the developer. Not a situation where the county has said, we want to establish a new access pattern. We're going to encourage this property to use that new access pattern, but now we're going to put a condition on the property owner that prevents it from moving forward because that new access pattern is under the control of somebody else. I don't think the board is establishing any precedent when you think about the unique circumstances here. We are trying to craft a solution, if you will, to something that you never have to craft a solution for in a normal case. And I totally agree with Commissioner Derner's comment that we're asking to tweak a condition to implement the intent of what the planning board and the applicant and the staff were trying to do in the first place, which is to honor the goal of the master plan to allow this property to access to the north and not put us in a position where we simply have to come back and refile an application and process the exact same application just in order to be able to start a new time frame. Because we'll find ourselves in the same position. I get a detailed site plan approved and might be, hopefully I won't find myself in the same position 3 years later, but that's where I find myself now. We're trying to be proactive. We're still 1.5 years away from this detailed site plan expiring, but we want to know and we want to plan and we want to move forward to be able to do that. And so that's why we are here. We don't want to have to go back and start over.
Okay.
I do understand. I don't have any issue with what you're attempting to do. My concern lies with the basis for which we're making the decision to get to that point. That's where, I mean, that's where my concern is. It's not about what we want to do, what needs to happen, or what you want to happen with condition 17. Again, it's the basis for us approving the request for reconsideration. That's the threshold issue for me.
Yeah, and I'm in the Mr. Haller, hold on one sec, because I think Mr. Warner wanted to comment as well. And Commissioner Washington, for what it's worth, I'm in the same place. I mean, I feel bad about it because I think that the solution probably is reasonable, but I don't think this meets the sort of the bar that we have to, jump over to request a reconsideration hearing. But Mr. Warner, you have a comment on this?
Well, I did. I just had two comments. One on just the issue of precedent. The way I view this request is a request by a developer to correct an error that they made. And I don't think that we want to open the door to reconsiderations just to correct errors that a developer makes. But aside from that, the substantive issue is not before us, but since Mr. Haller brought that up, it is important to note that the condition 17 that the planning board approved was based on the fact that Dower House Road to the north, at least one of the two roads that are designed to provide access to the subdivision would be available. What he wants to do when he gets to the substantive point is get you to agree to use what he calls the substandard road of Melwood Road to access his property to construct lots down there. And so that is a significant issue, and that'll be a problem for him even if this gets to the substantive point. So since he brought that up,
let me hold on
it.
that point though, because I actually don't want to get into the substance of it ahead of this request for reconsideration.
Mm-hmm. That's just fine.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Warner.
Yeah.
So commissioners, I'm sorry, Mr. Howell, you had a final thought on this?
Well, again, I mean, and it goes back to what I was just saying. I mean, so as you know, I think filing a detailed site plan and processing a detailed site plan is an expensive process. It takes many months to do, even on one like this, which is already approved. And so when does the applicant file that detailed site plan? Because this condition is a preliminary plan condition. So when does my client know that it is guaranteed to be within 3 years of these roads being done? That again, that goes back to my point about where there is an error, not intentional error. I mean, this isn't a blatant error that the board made. It's that the board was trying to allow for this project to move forward in accordance with the recommendations of the master plan, and work with the applicant and the staff to craft a condition that would accomplish that. And that condition is being, the protection that condition was intended to afford is no longer available to the applicant for reasons that are beyond the control of the planning board and beyond the control of the applicant. I don't think this is a precedent setting at all for the board to say, hey, yeah, we could not have known when we did that we should have approached this a different way, and we're willing to consider what that different way would be. I just think, this property is on the cusp of being sold to a builder, and the builder is not going to buy it if he can't build it. There just is no valid public purpose in forcing us to go back through an 8 or 9 month process, taking your staff's time for 8 or 9 months to process this exact same plan that when we get it approved is still subject to the same condition that doesn't allow us to control when we vest the subdivision.
Understood. Oh, I hear your point. All right, let's wrap this up, commissioners. Any further discussion on this? If not, I would look for a motion.
I empathize, Mr. Haller, but I would like to move that we deny the reconsideration request for preliminary plan 4-19012.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Opposed.
I actually didn't hear it, believe it or not.
No, opposed.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Dorner. I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 3-0. Mr. Haller, I know you're disappointed. Thank you for your time. Mr. Heath, thank you for your staff work as always. And Mr. Warner, thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And we'll move on to our final item for the day, which is 422, hold on one sec. It's a preliminary plan of subdivision 422048 Swan Crossing. This item was continued from planning board meeting of July 13th. We have Mr. Foreman, who will be representing the applicant. Mr. Heath will give the staff presentation. This actually is an evidentiary hearing as well. So if there are folks who are going to be speaking, I'm not sure we will have any folks who are speaking, but if so, there's no one in opposition sign up to speak. If so, we'll swear them in. Mr. Foreman, do you think we need to swear in your folks? Where are we with this?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I think if there's any specific questions from the members of the board, then maybe we'll swear anyone from my team in, but unless that happens, I think we're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Mr. I'll turn it over to you for the staff presentation.
All right. Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Antoine Heath with the subdivision section. Item 13 is a preliminary plan of subdivision for 4-22048 Swan Crossing, which proposes 57 lots and 6 parcels for the development of 57 single-family detached dwellings, one of which is existing. This application is supported by and subject to Certificate of Adequacy ADQ-2022-038, which was approved on July 5th, 2023, and meets all requirements of approval in accordance with the subdivision regulations. All information regarding this preliminary plan of subdivision has been stated in the staff report, and staff is recommending approval with conditions. The applicant submitted proposed revisions to findings and conditions prior to the Tuesday 12 p.m. deadline. These revisions can be found in the additional backup as applicant's Exhibit 1, and staff is in full agreement with these revisions. A citizen letter of opposition was also submitted prior to the deadline and can be found in the additional backup as Opposition Exhibit 1. The letter expresses concern over the public access to information regarding impact studies, impacts such as transportation, environmental, and public safety. In regard to transportation impacts, the approved certificate of adequacy is located in the backup and has been published on the Commission website for public viewing. All roads impacted by this proposal will operate adequately. In regard to public safety impacts, information on this is also located in the certificate of adequacy. Police and fire and rescue response times are adequate. The letter of opposition also discusses concerns on environmental impacts, such as the removal of trees and displacement of wildlife during construction. In regard to tree removal, the applicant has met woodland conservation requirements with 1.55 acres of on-site woodland preservation, 0.23 acres of reforestation, and 2.06 acres of off-site preservation. The applicant has proposed to impact 0.7 acres of the 2.04 acre primary management area, as well as remove 6 of the 26 specimen trees on site. This hearing was continued to this date in part to give the applicant additional time to reduce these impacts, which were more substantial in previous iterations. In regard to displacement of wildlife during construction, sediment and erosion control plans are required by the county for stabilization of land, and this includes silt fences around construction sites to contain dust and debris. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. Before I do that, I made a mistake. I misspoke on the vote on the last case. Just so we're clear on that for the record, the vote was 3 in support, 1 in opposition. It passed, but the vote was 3-1. And Mr. Foreman, I'll now turn to you on this. If there's no questions for staff, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. For the record, Nate Foreman with the offices of O'Malley, Mile, Nyland, and Gilmore in Greenbelt. It's my pleasure to be here this afternoon as the last case before the August recess. So I hope to make it as quick as possible. We are in agreement with staff. We have appreciated their hard work and communication throughout this process. We have had a lot of discussions about the environmental impacts. So I will be perfectly honest, it's a little
just concerning to hear this resident and voice opposition, because we have done, I think, major work. I do want to thank our civil engineer and his team for the work they've done in really minimizing all the impacts to the primary management area in this case, so that the only impact is from a storm drain outfall. And that's where it kind of has to be, just given the topography of the site. Everything else has been moved out of the primary impact. A substantial amount of the specimen trees have been saved. So we did do a lot of work with corroboration and collaboration with the environmental planning section to get that done. This case has sort of been in the works since 2019, when the applicant first met with community members to discuss it. And there have been significant community outreach efforts ever since then to ensure the community knows exactly what's going on. Most recently being on July 12th, when we were requested by Councilmember Oriata to hold a community meeting open to anybody who's interested, and to discuss this project in further detail. And we had about 25 or 30 members show up, and again, the usual. Some concerns were about the lack of communication, but the head of the Suitland Civic Association did say, and reiterated that this has been going on since 2019. We've been keeping the community abreast of all the situations. So we're really trying to make sure that, everyone is aware of what's going on, and we're doing as best as we can to get through this. So with that, my team is here, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that the board may have, but we would request approval of this preliminary plan as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Foreman or the applicant, any members of the applicant's team? No questions. We have nobody signed up to speak on this, so I will close the public hearing portion of this. Actually, before I do, no, Mr. Foreman, you don't have any rebuttal because you got nothing to rebut, and I assume you don't have any close either.
I don't want to slow it down this meeting any more than it needs to, right? You guys are anxious to get out of here.
Thank you. So this public hearing is closed.
Back. I appreciate your attempt to flip us back to the morning 92 minutes earlier.
Fair enough. So there's any deliberation on this, commissioners? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the amended findings as outlined in applicant exhibit number 1, and approve preliminary plan 4-22048 TCP 1-008-2023 and variance to section 25-122B1G, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and is further modified by applicant exhibit number 1. And Mr. Foreman, you're lucky number 13 in the last case of the day.
Second.
We got a motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Commissioner Dorner. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Thank you, Mr. Heath.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your August recess.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt, any further business before us until September?
Mr. Chairman, there are no additional business items before the board today. Enjoy your August.
Okay, everybody enjoy your August recess. We'll see you all in this format in September without objection. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Stay cool and stay hydrated.
Thank you, both humans and dogs.
Both.